loose way you thought. I saw this called Train with your friend, I think. It's already we are going.
Yeah, we are live.
Oh,
Also, this can always these beginnings are always a little sloppy, and that's part of the charm. There's always some and some and I always like to. There we go. Cool. And we've got the comments on the side. If you click comments in that bar on to the right, you'll be able to see people's comments. Usually they're relatively high quality. Sometimes it sort of degenerates, but yeah. And yeah, oh yeah, and by the way, it's sort of like usually it's only a small handful of people that watch it live. It's and then more people, when it's
and
live.
depending on the weirdo subject, maybe it gets even less.
Yeah, depends. Like the views they accumulate over time, like with the yeah, just with it living on the channel. So yeah, Bjorn Schmelzer. I'm saying Schmelzer, but it's probably Schmelzer, right?
No, no, you say it. You say it right.
Schmelzer. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm thrilled, man. I'm honored to have you on this. We'll do like a quick little intro. Bjorn Schmelzer, the founder and artistic director and conductor of Graindelavoix, spelled Graindelavoix for all our ugly Americans, and which means grain of the voice. We can talk about that. This is an early music vocal ensemble. If you're a fan of my channel, you watch me a bunch, you probably know what early music is. But straight up, what is early music we're talking about? Ancient European music, let's say before the Baroque period, let's say before the 18th century, something like that. And anyone who wants to check out my sort of crash course in early music, you can check that out on the channel. It's from a couple of months ago. Maybe Bjorn can take. He said he liked it, but maybe he can take me to task on certain holes or missteps that I made in that. But anyway, welcome, Bjorn Schmelzer. How you doing?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super glad and super honored to be here.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful.
It's,
Yeah. What's going on today? And yeah, you're from you're in Lisbon, but it's a Belgian based ensemble based in Antwerp. But you're living in Lisbon now.
yes, I live partly in Lisbon. My wife is from Lisbon. Lisbon, we have a little kid also going to school here, so I'm traveling a little bit between. But we are quite a lot touring also with the group. So I'm a little bit everywhere in Europe these days. Again, after the period we had
Yeah.
some year ago where it was very difficult to travel, but now again we started up. So
Yeah.
we are, yeah, and
Yeah.
now in Lisbon, yeah.
Yeah, nothing is more gothic than plague, right? I mean, that's sort of so COVID, sort of has a gothic flavor, just fear.
Well, yes, it and it of course it changed a lot for. In fact, interesting is that our last concert in 2020 was in New York. We had a concert in March where people were already still with. They started to go with masks to the concert was still like full with people, and people were
That's
not
good.
yet aware of what was happening. And then we were in the cloisters in New York. Maybe you know
Oh,
this.
beautiful. Oh, yes, I know the
Yeah.
cloisters very well. Yeah, I'm from New York, but I moved to LA
Okay.
like 3 years ago, and my girlfriend and I were moving back to New York in
Okay.
the spring. In the spring. So yeah, the cloisters is beautiful, man. It's so great.
So and then we took the plane to Poland, and there we got stuck. We could hardly even get out of Poland, but
Oh my
so
lord.
the concert was cancelled, and then we had quite a tough period for. We still made CDs in this period, so there came some CDs came out. That was good, but yeah, of course it's for everybody. And now we are back. We try to get slowly back on track, so to say. So.
Yeah. You put out the yeah, during COVID you made it was the is that the Josquin Dupre CD and the Cipriano de Rore one or
We had a box of three CDs with Gesualdo,
ah,
the all the responsoria for the Holy Week, so called. It's called Tenebre, that
Yes.
came out. So there, and that was in fact in the full COVID. All the concerts were cancelled. So the CD, this poor CD, was there alone as a sort of orphan. And then the year after, we indeed last year we brought out this Josquin the Undead CD,
Yes. Yes.
which
Yes.
is a title, a post-COVID title. Of course, it's clear that it's so. And yeah, well, that's where we are now. We will hopefully make new CDs, but for the moment, that will be maybe next year or something. We have to find finances and resources and so on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Jaska and the Undead. That was well. Okay, I mean, the first thing that gripped me about Graindelavoix was that just the musical, just the interpretations, just how you're doing early music. I mean, that was I was just I don't know how I came across you on YouTube, and so I was watching. I saw the Machaut, the Notre Dame Mass, and that was I think yeah I think I was just looking for like the just as many versions of it as I could find, you know, and this was it's just a really radical version. But then I was also struck by yeah, like Josquin the Undead and just the general visual aesthetic, even though maybe compared to the music, maybe you could say that that's quote unquote superficial, but it kind of isn't because there was some kind of there's a visual it 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 clearly had like a vision. I could tell there was a vision to it beyond just making great music. You know, there was something to that. Yeah, Lucas says, is the host cardio mic turned the wrong side around? Volume is really low. Um, no, it's the right way around, but let me turn it up then.
You sound great to me. So I don't know.
How's
For
that?
me,
Does that sound about right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yes, the undead. Well, how about yeah? Before we talk about that, I definitely want to talk about undeadness and what this means to your sort of vision of early music. But off the bat, yeah, let's bring people up to speed with just how you formed Graindelavoix and just the original concept, and you know.
yeah. Maybe just to immediately uh, talk about this undeadness. It's also that in this early music world, you have a lot of talks about immortality, monumentalizing composers, and I thought, how could immortality be taken in a much more subjective, problematic way? And then you come immediately to this notion of undeadness, of course, like it's somehow the same, but it's exactly completely not the same, I would dare to say. So that's just to say about undead and immortality. So I think we have a quite a dialectical way of dealing with the things we are surrounded by in the musical world that we try to work with. And of course, this came gradually, as you also said. I started like 20 years ago with the group, and in fact, I really wanted to do something. Maybe just to go even further back, I have been contaminated by this music since I was like 6, 7 years old. I remember
Whoa.
my mother bringing me to all kind of 3 and 4 hours Matthew Passions and Bach concerts, and even myself, I went quite early to get to the local library in Antwerp, some like LPs and maybe I think CDs were not yet there at that time. So I remember having this kind of recordings of Hilliard Ensemble, the early recordings with very strange music by Dunstable and by English weird composers I never heard about. And in fact, this weirdness has always accompanied me from the start. So maybe maybe as a I don't know how it's in your case, but I have the feeling I'm still of this generation of people that got surrounded by a lot of stuff they didn't understand. Like I was in a world of, let's say, adults I didn't understand, of culture I didn't understand. General, this world was a little bit a world that I had no access to. My parents had books. I didn't understand these books, but I was fascinated by them. So, and slowly I got into this world of all kind of impossible to grasp stuff. And I want, it's not that I wanted really to crack the code. So I didn't want even to decode it. I wanted just to be surrounded by this weirdness of this thing.
Yes.
So Maybe you recognize something of that. So I think,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a certain, maybe a certain personality type, or maybe just want just enjoying confusion, being disarmed by art, or challenged in some way. And so that's why I've said that the way I got into early music was very much concurrent with my getting into like post World War II modern, is just getting into like
yeah,
Stockhausen and Xenakis, and getting into like extreme forms of death metal and noise and stuff like that. So
exactly.
as beautiful and consonant as so much early music is, it was part of that sense of alienness.
Exactly.
You know,
And then you grow up or something, and you see that what culture is, what people mean with culture. It means neutralizing all that somehow. It's like it means like they when you go then to museums, or you go to an exhibition, you have a guide, and this guy flattens everything out, tries to explain everything and nothing at the same time, because you are no, but everybody is bored with it. You are not at all. So, and then you start to think, how is it possible that culture apparently is not what you think it means? It's something else. It means trying to understand what the symbolic culture around us means. And so my path was something, no, but that's not for me what culture is. Culture means this blind spot, continuous contact with a kind of blind spot in a painting, in a music, and not trying to decode it, or not trying to get it like clear, but on the
mm-hmm.
contrary, trying to circumvent it, or trying even to play with it or something like
Yeah.
negotiate. I don't know, negotiation. When you're a kid, this word doesn't exist in your.
Yeah. It sounds like, I mean, is this a simplistic way of saying it? But just hearing what you're saying, and like reading a little bit of your book, which we'll talk about. Yeah, it sounds like you have a. Am I right to say that there's this sense where your love of early music and the way you want to engage it, and the way you're sort of trying to encourage people to engage it, is like not to fall into this sort of fantastical fetishizing of the otherness of it, but also not trying to assimilate it as like this is normal and living right now. Sort of some kind of a third, more complicated way of dealing with the alienness of it. Is that
Maybe that's also a part of it, I think. But maybe another element that is connected to that is maybe also that what I also quite quick saw is that like that people can accept complexity, or let's say even darkness in the understanding in contemporary music. Like it's as if people always have this idea that the contemporary is somehow yeah, chaotic and complex to understand. But the past is this kind of realm where things happily are all spread out, clear, nice, harmonious, paradisiac, and so on.
okay? Yeah.
That's I thought that's such a strange view. Well, that's of course like the all the thoughts that are behind the kind of, let's say, the maybe even the ideological culture that surrounds let's say classical art and art practice and so on. So in fact, and also what I saw is that when I was dealing with this early music, is that most of the people that at that time were listening to this music, or a lot of people that I encountered, were exactly loving this music because of a kind of safe haven they found there, where they were not confronted with, for example, dissonance, because they had this idea that in the Middle Ages or in the Renaissance music there were no or less dissonance, or everything was pure and so on. And so and in fact, I developed a whole other idea about like a parallel way or something. And so more and more these things started to become conflictuous, in fact. And then there was, in fact, one moment that maybe there was one point that I thought, like 20 years ago or something. I thought, okay, now I'm at that point that I have to do something. I have to jump out. Maybe my first attempt to exit this world, but as you probably know, it's very
Yeah.
hard to exit something, because you always you get back all the time from the, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, but that's interesting that you actually had contact with a culture surrounding early music early on. I mean, you knew, because it's like when I got into this stuff, it was just this completely solitary, weird thing that I was into, and then I would get a couple of friends sort of into, and then some professors were like, "Oh yeah, ancient music, that's cool too. Check it out." But I didn't have any sense of like the attitudes of the practitioners of early music, the attitude, like just how it was presented, the politics. I mean, we'll talk about that too, because it seems like there's a very political angle to like how you relate to the early music scholarship and stuff. And I just had no sense of how other people liked this music, or what was even, where this was located in culture. Maybe in Europe it's more, maybe just more people are into it. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's the problem is also that if you are, as a kid, for example, you study music, or you go in a choir, for example, often these early repertoires are the most easy to grasp, because if you look at the scores of some of these music, it looks not very complicated. If you compare that with late 19th century or 20th century music, or even, it looks much more. So if you start in a music school, and also maybe you know that in Belgium, also Holland and so on, there is this tradition there is a strong, local tradition somehow in these countries to go along with that music that has. And this, maybe what you say about this politics, you have to imagine that, of course, a lot of this music comes from this region, from the north of France. If you talk about polyphony, for example, a lot of these in Belgium they call that Franco-Flemish polyphony.
Yes.
So, with Flemish there, but so that also the Flemish people can somehow say our music, and so also
claim that. Yeah.
In fact, even if you look at the history of this music from the 18th, 19th century on, in fact, this idea of going back to the music of the past comes with Romanticism. Yes, it's a romantic, even modern idea. It has nothing to do of this is something that there is a sort of nostalgia there for a purity, for an original music, and also, in fact, these early scholars. One of them is even an English, Charles Burney. I don't know if you heard about him. An 18th century interesting guy who traveled in France and Flanders to look for the old sources of so-called in fact, what he was looking for is the origin of Western music, classical Western music. And he thought that these sources should be found in monasteries in Flanders somewhere. I don't know, like, so Gothic novel and kind of like almost like vampire stories, and the search for these original sources and try to vampirize them go hand in hand there in the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century. So, and this is somehow, of course, nobody knows that now anymore, but it's the horizon still. It's still the horizon. It means that, how to say, for example, when nationalistic things come up and so on, the Flemish masters, the big painters, but then you have also these the polyphonies, the composers that are from here, and so on and so forth. So there is this like half crypto nationalistic discourse always lurking behind.
Sure. Yeah.
And so well, and then of course also this origin of music, the fact that it's like the start of, like, let's say, polyphonic music, like music with many parts and so on, breaking with monody and so on. So I found that all very interesting, but I saw quite I saw the danger also lurking there, and in fact, I'm a big fan of Adorno, for example, who hated early music, so to say.
Yeah, I knew that, but I haven't actually read his stuff on. No. I mean, I've read him trashing jazz, and I've read him extolling Schoenberg. But yeah, his stuff. He hated early music. That's such a weird.
He trashed early music also completely, and in fact, if I would be a defender of early music, I would even say, let's read Adorno and let's take his critics serious, because he makes incredible points. In fact, now that of course he was critical towards jazz also, but in the same book, this introduction on the sociology of music, it's a wonderful. It's in fact almost like a comical. I think for me it's very comical. This part, it's where he talks about types of listeners. I don't know if you remember this.
No, go for it.
So, and he talks one moment. So he talks about the ideal listener, and it goes down, 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 and then almost down on the list is what he called the resentment listener.
Mm-hmm.
In German is Ressentimenthörer.
Right, or French ressentiment. I mean, it's this. Yeah, it's well, that's a sort of a Nietzschean idea, right? That sort of resentment is this sort of like a sort of sick modern soul, right? Or is it a different kind of resentment that we're talking about?
It has to do with, of course, it's like it's a modern soul, because he what is very beautiful with his resentment listener is that he also says that it looks like a critical person. It looks like a guy who is against commodification of art, against reification of music, as he calls that. I don't know how it's someone that is critical towards commercialization of in modernity or post-modernity and so on. So it looks like a type who is an interesting critical stance towards our culture and so on. But then it's clear that instead of trying to work through these problems, it's someone that regresses back in the past and in fact completely swimming in his own nostalgia. And more I think, and that's for me very important. What he says also is that there is a sort of fantasy of originality always there lurking. Like it's always as if, and that's what I would say. It's a little bit linked. What I like also a lot is criticism on historicism, as what you call in general the historicist position. It means that you somehow believe that. You could go back to the past and try to reconstruct what people were doing there.
Yeah.
Based on, for example, on the scores that you have, on remnants that are remainders from the past, like a sort of restoration vibe. No, you think you can restore the building as it was, although we see we are not the same people and so on. But also more problematic is even that it somehow presupposes that people in the past were not, let's say, alienated from their own world. It presupposes, and that's I think the most important critique. It presupposes that people from the 15th century were completely embedded in the symbolic culture of their own time.
Yeah.
For example, we would be completely feeling so well and natural in our own.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's sort of this sort of pure reactionary critique of modernity. Seems like it has this thing of like, okay, we've declined, we've fallen, but let's just walk backwards like a crab. Well, I guess crabs walk sideways, but like as though you can just back it up to a better time.
Yes.
Which in fact is fantastical. I mean, I have to admit though, my enjoyment of early music, I think, operates on a few levels, some deeper than others, because I think that I have always been deeply inspired by just the pure sound of the music. I mean, harmonically, rhythmically, the counterpoint. But I actually have to admit, if I'm honest with myself, there is a sort of nostalgic, even though I know it's fantastical. I mean, this just to even be able to dream of just some time where the crisis of the modern world just was supposedly not happening, but you sort of you've referred to you've used the word modernity. You said something about how like modernity has always been there, or that like modernity in music or in culture, like it shouldn't be viewed as just something that happened recently after some linear progression. Is that right? Did you say something along those lines, where like modernity is some kind of thing that was already embedded in the past, or like?
Yeah, I think strangely enough, in fact, I studied anthropology, and I was like I did some research as an anthropologist and so on. But in fact, through this research and through becoming this kind of whatever would-be anthropologist or whatever, I became in the end, or I got more and more into a kind of modernistic idea. And nowadays, I'm always would like to reverse. Maybe I don't know if you know that book of Bruno Latour, who just died, this sociologist.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, but I've heard the name. Yeah.
He has this sort of legendary book for sociologists called "We Have Never Been Modern," and it's in
I've heard
fact
of this.
it's the typical. It's also very strange. I think the left now also is a little bit cut into people that still stick to modernity, and others say no, modernity is the problem of everything. Through modernity, everything is got worse, and we should maybe. And in fact, what I now more and more am going to is that idea that we have always been modern in a way. And for me, the idea of an artistic practice, even if it's happening in a village that looks like remote or whatever we fantasize about it, I think that an artistic breakthrough, is always the experience of modernity in one way or another. So for me, you can also say that what I call the experience of modernity is exactly the artistic breakthrough. It means that you are confronted with the fact that things are not anymore as they should or could be. There is a kind of break. You experience a failure or something that doesn't fit anymore.
Okay.
And this element, maybe this is what you could call then, what is it called in modernity, alienation, that idea of alienation. I think the experience of alienation is almost the primarily experience. Well, even a psychoanalyst would tell you that
this is okay. So yes. So alienation is not only is it not a bad thing, but it's part of the inherent. It's an inherent part of the artistic experience. Is that this is?
Well, I see. And I can give you an example. Maybe that's quite interesting. That I have been 20 years ago. I was in a village in Sardinia. Sardinia. I don't know how you say it in English.
Yeah, Sardinia. Yeah.
People go there on holidays and so on. But there are still some interesting small villages where people still sing in a kind of oral tradition, as they call it. They do a kind of four-voice, what is called in musicology, a falso bordone. And that's a sort of four-voice psalm singing a little bit, like it can be syllabic, it can be melismatic. But they do it without scores. So it's just from generation to generation transmitted orally. And it's also not improvisation, because they really try to do it as they think it should be done. So it's memory work, let's say. And what is so beautiful, in the beginning, I was there, and it's fascinating to hear them sing. Maybe it's in Castelsardo. If you put Castelsardo and Miserere or something on Google or YouTube, you will find a lot of tracks of what they do, the singing. It's very special.
It's a Castelsardo.
Castelsardo, yeah, it's the village. And it's very strange thing. If you never heard it, it's like a sort of, you hear it's a sort of choral singing, but the voices are strident and nasal and there is something like lamenting in it, very like heavy a little bit and dragging or something. But it's these strange practices that you hear that at the same time they are like lamenting and dragging, but you cannot stop listening to them.
Yeah.
So but the wonderful thing is that and that I saw that there, and I got immediately in trouble with ethnomusicologists, like real professionals who were there and saw this village as their monopoly of study and so on. So what I saw immediately is that the local inhabitants, let's say the people that live there, the villagers, they hated this practice. They don't like it at all. They are alienated literally from what these people do, although it's so-called something ancestral, whatever. And even the singers themselves, they have not really an idea why they are keeping ongoing with this practice. So they are stuck to this. The guys that feel sometimes there are young guys who feel how you call that called. They feel the vocation, or
they feel like it's called to do it. I mean, that's the thing. Is like traditionalism is not tradition. You can only have a traditionalist movement or impulse in the modern world where tradition is being kind of uprooted. So this is kind of like
it's even I would say even that it's only through not sticking to to the traumatic experience of this alienation. Even these people there, they feel like, what are we doing here? What is this? What we try to get going, nobody likes it. They have a lot of problems with. They sing in the church, but the clergy hates it because they want Laura Pausini covers with then "I love you, Jesus loves you" or something like just like schlagers or something. So they have to really maintain it, and nobody likes it. Only tourists and some crazy guys from the north of Europe or something. What I find so interesting is that, in fact, uh, this position is exactly what makes it so authentic. Let's say it's this
Yes.
self-inauthenticity which is the condition for authenticity. And the problem is it's traumatic and it's hard to. We are still there. Okay, I was stuck. So this trauma is the heart is the thing to go through, and you can do two things: or you maintain, you endure it, and you continue, or you regress. I would almost dare to say. So you fall back on nostalgia, on making it into a revivalist thing.
Yeah.
You clean up the suits and the things. You make it something, and so on and so forth. And in fact, I see ethnomusicology more and more a kind of soldier of this kind of revivalist ideas. So they come to they tell the villagers what it means. So musicology is there.
Right, tell them about their own culture, and they're happy to hear it because they just want the top expert to tell them what they're reviving. Essentially, is that?
Yeah. One most funny thing was that they had to put some kind of objects on an altar plate or something one moment in one of the rituals they do, and they didn't know what the order was. So they were discussing and so on. But this discussion is part of, they never know. So one moment, one guy made a sort of short circuit. He went into the sacristy and got the book of the anthropologist, of the ethnomusicologist, with the picture of these objects to help. So it was so suddenly the anthropological study becomes the manual of the culture.
Yes. I could see how this is frustrating and sort of inartistic from a real artist's point of view. It's sort of there's sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say I'm interested in bringing it back if you don't mind me circling back to what you were saying about modernity being this thing that keeps coming back. I'm seizing on this idea because I love it, but I it's like I want to hear more. Like maybe explain because when you say modernity, I think that I probably there's some shared understanding of what that means, but I mean, maybe if you could sort of tell people like what is typically meant by modernity in art or and then maybe like further explain how for you that it's not a period. I mean, when I think of modernity, I just think of like the Renaissance forward or maybe the Enlightenment forward-ish, exactly. Right? So like whether that's the age of reason, I mean primarily that. I mean the age of reason and science, and then if there's sort of crisis, or at least supposed constant unfolding crisis that has come from that. Let's talk more though just about how any art of any period, how the sort of the feeling of breakthrough is modern. Like what is the crisis that you get from like any great piece of art,
I think it's interesting that you said Renaissance is maybe modernity, or is it later? Or so I think this is already a little bit the proof that if you also go to historical studies, where is modernity starting? And the interesting thing is that if you read on where modernity could have started, you can go to the study of, I don't know, even Bataille, who puts it in the caves of the, I don't know.
Right, the cave paintings in Lascaux with the hands.
The hands and so on, where there is already like the subjective split or whatever, some subjectivity is appearing there, whatever. So I think that's in music, it's also like that. You would officially say, okay, modernity starts maybe after the French Revolution. What the period before is called Ancien Régime, mostly in this historical.
Yes, people say that, yes, Ancien Régime, right.
The Ancien Régime, which means corporatism, feudalism, absolutism. People naturalize the bond between God and humans, between humans and so the things are naturalized, are harmonious. Mostly the music is harmony of the spheres. It's a project. It's a kind of
supposedly, right? The idea is that, right? And this is pre-democratic, right? I mean, on the simplest sort of political level,
all what was connected with the old world, and where people now, some people at least, and unfortunately too much long back to back to, but okay, that's something else. Um, Anyhow, yeah, I think that this moment of after the French Revolution was a traumatic moment in the whole world. It was just very hard and it was a global thing. It was like, well, global in the world of, I mean, the world that thought that is ruling the world at that
Yeah,
time.
right, right.
About. So there was so. But at the same time, I think that this idea of we lose something and we have now to move forward, and how do we move forward? Because in a way, how can we move forward? This kind of predicament, I think, cut, I guess, the opinions in two ways. People that were progressive and were seeing industrialization, emancipation, and so on, liberalism, and so on. And then you had the people who could not get to that and stuck to this, were too traumatized maybe, and were sticking to the dream of this old world. And so that's a model, I think, a model that is continuously to reappear even now today. I think still today we are not over that trauma. I think what happens now in the world, and all the crises, even about, like, if you talk about COVID and you have people for vaccination against and so on. In fact, it's always about how do we deal with separation, with the trauma of loss of
Yeah.
and this comes always back. But then it's also interesting to see that if you go back in time, indeed, you said Renaissance. Indeed, Renaissance is also already somehow.
Yes. It's already a looking back. Yeah, you said something in the book how like everyone has these different opinions on when,
Exactly.
quote unquote, the decline started.
Yes.
It's funny. I was watching like a not an academic, is like a, I can't remember who it was, but some like a slightly conservative, like not even reactionary, but like very normal kind of conservative commentator. And like I can't remember what he was saying, but he said something about 1992, and I just started laughing. Like he was like, that's when he thought the crisis started. And I'm thinking, like, so when you happen to turn 30, that's when the break, the crisis started when you just happened to turn 30 years old. It's like, was it,
Exactly.
so anyway, everyone's got their own opinion.
So, but yeah, well, it's a little bit like that, and so maybe it's interesting. For example, in the 16th century, and even till the French Revolution, I read that somewhere in a book of a French historian. She said there that in France alone, almost every day since the Middle Ages till the French Revolution, people were rehearsing the French Revolution. There was every day somewhere in a village or a city a revolt or a massacre or whatever, a kind of attempt to break through the absolutistic feudal system or whatever. And so it's wonderful to see that, in fact, I think even Hegel says that somewhere, that history has to rehearse its big events or something. They have to.
Okay. Yes. That's interesting. Yeah.
And so what you can see is that, in fact, French Revolution is maybe just like the moment that it really globally, or at least semi-globally, happened, that on more levels than just culturally, economically, socially, and so on, also through the aftermath and with Napoleon, Restoration, so on, that there happened something there that was so with such an impact that the trauma stayed, let's say. Okay. But if you, for example, I work a lot on other traumas, let's say, from the past, like, for example, iconoclasm. I'm really interested in this 16th century movement of iconoclasts. These people that were mostly so-called reformatory or Protestant people who broke statues and
Right,
relics. Yeah. At the same time, they were somehow interested in these relics. They believe, why do you break something?
Yeah. Well, that's what we're in a moment of literal iconoclasm. Well, at least 2 years ago in America with toppling statues. There were these toppling. I can't remember which ones, but of various founding fathers who held slaves. I can't remember which ones. But I've heard some people. Say it's like, well, that's. Like what you're going for is cool, but right, like why are you investing these particular symbols? Why can't you just keep these guys up and just sort of strip them of their symbolic function? Is it symbolize? Like in a way, someone was saying we weren't even thinking of these statues as statues of slave owners. we had sort of stopped thinking of them as that, and now that you're toppling them, it's like you're actually
Mm.
amplifying their slaveholderness in a way that
No, no,
we could have just let it die,
yeah, and you maybe you wake up a sort of almost a magic force in them. There is something sort of magical in this whole, and there is something dialectical. What you say also, so it's like clear that people abolish something but why do they do it? Is it to forget it or exactly not to? So this entanglement is really interesting, I think here. And
Yeah,
in
yeah.
I think cancel culture and iconoclasm they are very near to each other. There are people, yeah, I think that's you could compare all these movements with each other, I think. So I love that a lot, this period. And I see also in art the artists that were also, of course, themselves traumatized by these iconoclastic movements. They saw their own artworks broken on the streets, in the market squares, in the churches, and so on.
This was
And
in the 60, sorry, this was in the 16th
yeah,
century across Europe, or where are we talking? Because I've heard of this movement, but I don't
yeah,
know
it
where.
was. In fact, you see that. In fact, almost you can say it's almost across Europe. I think maybe that Spain, Italy, the south of Europe was not so much touched by it, but of course the UK. Still, if you go to the UK, you see still these churches where whole parts are broken of these Gothic churches. It was with Anglicanism there. And then you have the Netherlands, France, Germany, all these countries, and then even Bohemia and so on. All these the countries that are there, they were all touched by this iconoclastic movement. But at the same time, it's not just that iconoclasm means we break down what we said before already. It's not just we break down. It's also we find that the power of these things is too big. We need to negotiate in another way with it. And at the same time, and that's wonderful. I think someone, for example, I don't know if you know this painter from Flanders, Peter Bruegel.
Oh,
Bruegel,
sure, yeah, Bruegel, yeah.
this
Bruegel,
guy,
yeah.
this guy started to paint just after these iconoclastic raids. Uh, he started to make only grisaille. It means he painted without colors. He started to paint stone paintings, so to say.
Okay.
And this was his artistic reaction, you could almost say, to the end of art. He had this idea, okay, we are living in end times. This is apocalyptic here. They are breaking down the world. Like these religious wars are so strong that people will just vanish. It will be all over. There were this real strong apocalyptic thinking. And Bruegel was one of the guys who, in an artistic way, worked through these problems. And you have this wonderful, it's not so much like 4 or 5 paintings of him, which are from that period. And they are gray paintings, painted in gray and brown colors. And they are the best what he made. So you can say you need iconoclasm in order for artists to get through, to break out of maybe functionalistic art. We make it for people that pay for it and so on. No, in that period, the late Bruegel, you can say, the late style, where, as Adorno said, the late style is always catastrophic. You see a painter like Bruegel becoming catastrophic in his own painting and get to what art is about, in fact. So
Okay. Yeah. So there's always a catastrophic and apocalyptic kind of sense to our artistic breakthrough, no matter how much it seems to be serving the church or the state or whatever sort of functional purpose it might supposedly have. No. This is very interesting.
I would think it's the what you call then the ruination, or how you say that in English, this catastrophe is something that in art it can be taken up in a not completely negative way. Of course, catastrophe is terrible, but as we all know, we need to see films about catastrophes because it's our way to deal with catastrophe in a way. We need mediations of catastrophe. So you can see, I think art is just mediation of catastrophe in general.
Yeah. Well, I think, this is probably an obvious, very simple thing to someone who's like really, really deep into like a critical theory and stuff. But I only recently learned that the word critical comes from crisis. I did not actually know that, and it really changed my, or maybe excited me to ponder more what the word critique means, what it means to critique something, because I sort of, I mean, when I was first getting into any kind of philosophy, and I kind of jumped in with like Foucault, I guess, like in college, you just jump in with this sort of the French sort of hip stuff from the past 50 years. But I mean, to me, critique was like, okay, this is what it means to do intellectual work. Like critique me, like that's sort of the definition of the intellectual life. But then I started thinking like, so that means does that mean, so that means the intellectual life means pushing things to crisis. Like there's something negative about this, And so then I start to think like, okay, I'm not an intellectual first and foremost. I'm an artist first and foremost, And so it's like reading and thinking, etc., is this sort of ancillary thing that informs what I do, but it's not what I'm really trying to do. So then I'm like, is it beautiful? Do you know what I mean? I mean, is critique inherently a beautiful thing, or is it just negative? Because it's like from a very like reactionary or even conservative perspective, the main thing is just like the left likes to tear things down. That's what they do. They want to destroy the whole fucking world, right? And it's like, it's like that's obviously this very like reductive, paranoid kind of thing, because a big part of being human is to critique and question things. I mean, that's sort of like a basic function of thought, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, do you kind of feel like all great art is critical, sort of? I mean, is there sort of, I mean, does art like this sort of modernity, when you say all great artistic breakthroughs there has modernity in them? I mean, is how synonymous or do you feel like critique and modernity are? I guess is a big question.
Yeah. No, in fact, maybe sometimes I call my colleagues and myself like that we are sort of nurses of old culture or old or like this garbage or these heaps of old stones, and in order to save them from this kind of idea that art in that time was just functional, and it was just people paid for it, and then they got a nice painting, and it was symbolic, and it had just it was like, how many times I heard guides in the museum saying, yeah, like a painting of Jan van Eyck, for example, that's like a Mercedes today, like, for example, this kind of
wait, like a what, like a
Mercedes, like a car or
a Mercedes, yeah, you're right, a status symbol, yeah.
Like it was just a symbol to show off a little bit from a rich guy asked. And then you think, yeah, okay, I mean, is there much difference with now? People now, also rich people, buy these paintings, and it's also to show. So, but what does that basically say about what art is about? I mean, so for me, this is absolutely like a non-discourse.
Right. That would be critical. That would be a critical view that is, in a way, purely negative, or on some level is stripping away any kind of spiritual essence to the art by.
What I think is what is critical in what it means to be critical as an artist. I think it means that you don't know, just basically, you don't know, and from this point of view that you think you may somehow know something, and you knit it together with all kind of things you don't know. You make this work of art, or it can be a music piece, I think there's even no difference between performance. A performer who, even I make no distinction between, maybe I save my own shop, but it's like some people ask me like, oh, but you don't do your own music, you do music from other people. And then I say, yeah, but we are mediators of this music from other people. If we would not do this music from other people, nobody would do it, because these other people, they are dead, or they are not there anymore, or nobody's interested in it. So I think it's the same if you're a performer or a pure creator, let's say. I think the position is always that you don't really know, and that you negotiate with the material you work with.
Yeah.
And out of this negotiation, something appears, which is not negative, because there is something there. But I think the whole process of, maybe this is the proof that critical theory or critical approach, what is then called in a philosophical way negative, I think it's the work of art is the proof that it's productive and that it's fertile work, because and in fact it is, in fact, an artwork, I think, is the mediator to deal exactly with trauma, or to deal with castration, symbolic castration, as it's called in psychoanalysis, or it deals with with the fact that we don't know, that we have no answers to. And the thing is, we have all this positivistic cognitive knowledge more and more and more. It's accumulating. Nevertheless, the don't knows are also accumulating. So they go hand in hand or something.
Good, good. That's reassuring. That makes me feel like I'm doing something right over here with my artistic process. I'll say with the something that I mean, even though we haven't used this word yet, I mean, we're definitely like touching on it. I mean, something that I just keep fixating on just in my head lately is just the idea of progress, just what that word means, who owns that idea, how that idea is used, especially in art. Politically, obviously, it's like a lot of talk about, but I mean, something that I'm not sure if this is exact, like maybe if you would put it this way, but it seems like there's a historical way that you can look at trauma, whether it's the French Revolution or whether it's iconoclasm in the 16th century or whether it's some kind of just even polyphonic music as some kind of a crisis, it seems like you can, if you really believe in progress as this like full-on linear narrative of things getting better or developing, it's kind of like you're taking the trauma and making it not trauma. I mean, you're kind of neutralizing it in a way, like you're taking these events of disruption and trauma and crisis and being like, well, ultimately it was all in the service of now or something like that, so it's like it smooths it all over. Do you, and a reactionary point of view, you're like, yes, that same thing, but it's bad. Like, it's like decline. It's like you think it's decline rather than progress, but it's actually, you still have the same idea of like an overall teleology of history. I mean, would you say that like the idea of progress is sort of like that you're like not really into that idea in art? I mean, it seems like that would be not part of your view.
No, I am. I think partly I would even dare to embrace it, but I would maybe not talk about progress. Although progress, it means just progreder. It means just moving on. It means just to move on. You could say in a Beckettian way, I cannot move on, but I have to move on. He has this.
Oh, Beckett, right. I cannot go on. I will go on. Yes.
I'm going on. So that's maybe the modern, our contemporary way of moving on and our progress.
Right. Yeah.
I think progress. I love somehow still. I stick somehow still to that word of emancipation. The idea of emancipation. I think you cannot move on without this idea of emancipation. I think, but it is painful. It hurts. I think that's the problem. I think imagine that, and in this sense, we are not 19th century evolutionist progressives that want to just move forward like without looking back, and there is a lot of collateral. There is more collateral damage than any progression, maybe. Right. But I think moving forward is just a very painful program, a very, very painful project. And I think people who, for me, they are on the same side. People that want to regress or want to go back because it's not painful. They want to stick to something that they knew, that was safe, and at the same time, I think through some kind of, like, let's say, experience, like that's what I try to do also with my own group. It's not true that the past was, let's say, a safe space.
Right,
it's not. And we continuously keep on going with, oh, look at how in the 15th century people could still, whether they were still obedient, maybe, or don't know, or no. What you hear also a lot, of course, is this kind of idea. People were poor, but they didn't care, and people were rich. And a complete lack of, there is no class struggle, and if there was a class struggle, people just had no problem with it. It was all just fine like that.
Right, you accept your caste because there's no promise of upward mobility or whatever,
Exactly.
But if you're talking about emancipation, I'm interested in that now, because that's one of those words that I've always been naturally attracted to it, but lately I'm getting a little older and I'm not sure I'm getting as excited by the idea of emancipation. I've felt often too free in my own life. Maybe that's a class thing or whatever, but I wonder.
I think it's not. It has nothing to do with to be free. It has rather to. I think emancipation is painful. It's something that you, in fact, not. It means that you. It means that you become. It's a sort of process of othering or something, whatever you want to call it. Is in fact, it means that you discover that things are not what you thought they are. That's basically, I think, what it means.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
maybe to go back to art, if you if we maybe we can also talk about that, like Gothic art. It's something
Okay.
that fascinates me a lot. If you look at one of the most known philosophers of modernity and this kind of progress, even so-called pseudo-progress, Hegel. For him, modern art, romantic art, as he calls it, modern art, in fact, was Gothic art. It's very strange. He saw this point of what he calls romantic art, but romantic, it means like the moment where you are alienated from what you are. You are getting out of you are not just, things are just not nicely together, like in classical
Okay.
art.
And so he did not he was not on board with this idea that we've always been modern. To him, Gothic art was the birth of modernity, or the sort of pinnacle of it, or
Apparently, for him, that's so wonderful. In fact, that he sees the birth of. He puts the cradle of modernity even earlier. He sees that with Christianity. But then also when he talks about art or architecture, it's for him Gothic architecture, which is the most, let's say, articulating this idea of modern alienation, of modernity, whatever he calls it. It's also interesting. He has these theological terms that only now Hegelians are using that again, because before it was like kicked out because it was too Christian and so on. But he uses the term of in Germany it's called Entäußerung. It means getting out. Like there is the Greek word kenosis. It means like emptying out, in fact.
Yes.
So squeezing out something. Well, I say sometimes to my singers even, like, let's squeeze out the score. Let's go to the end point of something. Like.
Okay.
And
Yes. And is that and that's an essence of modernity and the Gothic and emancipation as well, is sort of an emancipatory thing, kenosis, or
I think so. It's also funny that sometimes you see that often, like classical buildings that going back to Roman and Greek antiquity and so on, often they are used in context where you see some kind of, like, let's say, established institutional idea that you need to articulate. You get a Greek temple or a building that looks like a kind of Roman or Greek architectural building, because these are buildings who are perfect in themselves. They have no other side. There is nothing worked through. It's just what it is. But Gothic, I think it's such a weird architecture. If you think about it, there is it's something also very interesting, is that it continues on and on. Most Gothic buildings, if you look at the history of most Gothic buildings, they are never finished. They are one moment interrupted. The works are interrupted. So
yeah.
buildings are stopped one moment because, well, they thought, yeah, what we have no money anymore, or
Yeah. Yeah,
it makes
someone said, I can't remember who, this famous thing, like that great work of art is never finished, it's only abandoned. I can't remember who said that. But,
yeah, that's who said that again. Yeah, that's a wonderful. I love that.
Yeah. But the sort of discontent. Well, and so that this thing of feeling like Gothic.
Yeah, Leonardo or something. Leonardo, I think, sent it.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. And I think, but so yeah, this thing, this idea that that the Gothic is that these buildings are unfinished.
Yeah.
And that I remember in the book early on, you were talking about how that has something to do with death, right? I mean, how great art, or especially Gothic art, sort of repeats its own death. Is that?
But that's also an idea that you can find in Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, where exactly he talks about music. It's a little bit. This is also some idea that I think was picked up in the 19th century again. That idea that what's happening in music physically, the moment you. That's what Leonardo says. I like this definition. He says music dies by birth. So it means you start to sing something or start to play something, but the moment of its appearance, its emergency, is already its downfall, its decay somehow.
Yes.
And in his Paragone, that's the book that he wrote on the comparison between the arts. Of course, he favorizes painting. He has to apparently. So he says, okay, music is the little sister of painting, because why? Because he thinks of polyphonic music. You can show many things at the same time. There is a simultaneity in polyphonic music. You have all these voices, so you can hear different things, like in a painting. But he says the problem is exactly that you have to continuously continue with music. There is this compulsive repetition drive in music, which you don't have with painting, he says. A painting lasts forever. Well, that's what he says, but okay. It's eternal, or potentially eternal. But then, and I find that fantastic. If you think of Leonardo's own production, he is this great procrastinator of art. He never finished any artwork almost. All the works he made were unfinished. Like there is this, the Madonnas, all the. I think you could think of most paintings of Leonardo. They are somehow not finished.
No, I did not know that, but yeah.
Yeah, and so what is so weird is that he then, for his own artworks, his own paintings, he was not following his own, let's say, ideal of painting, like where a painting would be this. So what he did, in fact, for painting, he was repeating this musical.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
So this is, of course, wonderful. And then, of course, there is this. I think Walter Pater in the 19th century, this idealist. Victorian aesthetician in the 19th century, he says something, that all art aspires to the condition of music.
Yeah, right. Because it dies in its own birth and has that quality to it. And I think you said that. I think you said that that's what gives music a demonic quality, like that there's something demonic about that repetition of its own death. It also kind of makes me sort of think of Nietzsche, eternal return. I don't know, maybe, it's on some level. Although I don't know if Nietzsche's really talking about death exactly, but
no, I think he also talked. I have read Nietzsche like 20 years ago. I was fully into that, the beautiful Birth of Tragedy and so on, which is a book on music basically. But it's so long time ago that of course, the eternal return and so on. But of course, I think what I think for sure is it very linked to is the idea of death drive, the idea of Freud, the Freudian death drive, which is this idea of getting stuck in something. No, I think it's like this idea of stickiness, of getting. Well, again, this Beckettian idea of you cannot go on, but you have somehow to go on.
Is that stickiness? That's an interesting visual, because that's when I think of the death drive, I think more of like dissipating or like deflation, maybe sort of like that emptying out that you were talking about, kenosis, or the German word that I sort of missed. That you were talking about with the sort of emptying out, the hollowing out. When I think of death drive, I kind of think of, that's my sort of visual image. What's the sticky, like death drive as being stuck in something? Like,
yeah, that's how Freud. I think in German, the Klebrigkeit des Triebes, he says. So the stickiness of the drive, he calls it, and well, basically, it's what you cannot swallow. There is something unswallowable, something that because you cannot swallow it, you have to repeat it. And it's through this unswallowable repetition that you somehow get through it. That's the wonderful dialectical idea of Freud. I think that it is the repetition drive that somehow brings you out of your stuckness in a way.
Sort of unassimilable. So it's there's some kind of element psychically or aesthetically we're talking about where you can't assimilate it, but you somehow move past that, not by assimilating it though. The death drive is moving on without assimilating the thing. Is that?
I think so. And what I find wonderful is that for me, Freud is somebody who found finally, you can say, after so many time, an articulation of something that we all know in a way. It's not something, you can say it's an invention of Freud. Of course, but it's also something that we start to understand, wow, but in fact, it's the idea of Gothic. It's the idea from so many painters of of composers, of singers, of musicians lamenting. You find that in blues and so on, in so many music, this repetition idea and so on. So how I read history is not so much the idea that one moment somebody invents something and then, well, it starts to appear. I believe in a sort of retroactive reading of history. You read history from the dead drive of Freud backwards. What is, by the way, this backwards reading is a Freudian concept also. He called that afterwardsness or belatedness. You read always from the end point back. And so the wonderful thing is that thanks to people from the 18th, 19th, 20th century, we are able to read stuff in paintings of 14th, 15th century, whatever, music, polyphonic music, that the contemporaries at that time, they had no idea about. They only, and I think it's not a way of saying, oh, these people didn't know. It's more like the fact that they expressed it in artworks proves that they were not aware of it, because then they would have talked about it. I think an artwork is always the cover-up or the articulation of something we cannot talk about. It replaces or change or is the replacement of an impossible discourse. I think that's what an artwork is. So we have a problem, a predicament. We have something that is impossible. It's an impossibility in our society. Well, we make art about it. But this was, I think, in the 14th century the same. Their predicaments, they made art about, and it's only now that we have a name for them. Now we can find a discourse and understand how what they did 600 years ago, well, it's another way of dealing with, in a way, the same problems, I think.
Okay, so in a way, then art, I mean, is sort of the opposite of critique in a way, or different from it, because you're, rather than uncovering. See, okay, so but that's interesting, right? So it's like, is art an uncovering or a covering? You know, because you were saying how it's a sort of a covering of an impossible discourse, but then there's also the sense that it's a revelation and a sort of the sense of a rupture.
I think this is wonderful that you say that it is at the same time a covering and an uncovering. I think it's like that. There is this, and that's also why art. Maybe that's why it's so difficult politically also, because it can function as a cover and it can function as a revelation.
Yeah.
In a progressive or in a let's say conservative way or whatever, everybody can use it in a way. So because it has this doubleness or this ambiguity maybe.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I was getting into with someone that they were talking in this very simplistic terms about how art needs to be political, or it needs to make the world a better place or move things toward justice, like something where I really knee-jerked against that, where, you know, I didn't want to say, no, art shouldn't be that, but I was just like, I mean, the fact that you really think that the point of art is just critiquing power structures and I was just like, I cannot abide by that. That is just like, no, you know, but so maybe on some level I do like the covering, you know, the covering of, you know, art as a cover. I don't know. I mean, Heidegger's talking about how technology is, the essence of technology is discovering, right? Discovering something, uncovering. I haven't gone that deep into that, but that's not art, that's technology. But I that was kind of like, wow, I had never thought of that.
Yeah, he has this notion of truth and aletheia or something in Greek, I think, and it has this notion of this doubleness, I think, also. But also, that's a long time ago. I can't remember. Maybe that's thin ice for now too.
Yeah.
I think it's true. I think you had also this nice, funny video that I watched because I wanted to be not completely unprepared, where you talk about that you said that everything has to be politicized nowadays, like that.
Yes.
But exactly, maybe this is the problem, that in the end, it's the most ideological way of not to be political at all, in a way. It's like creating just the opposite in the end.
Yeah. Several people said that to me. They were like, if you're really so into not being political, why are you making a video about not being political? I mean, it's like, you know, they were just like, you're being very political, like, you know, so just.
But I got your point that it was absolutely, it's, I think I could stand by that claim, or I see that.
I mean, I just sort of was thinking, though, it's like, I mean, some people are saying, like, look, if you are trying to be quote unquote apolitical, retreating from politics, that is inherently conservative. So you're doing conservative politics. So I hear that and I'm like, I'm not allergic to that accusation, you know. I just, if that's what you think, I'm, you know, but I just, it seems like it's a fantasy to think that art was ever about challenging power structures or that it was about upholding power structures or the way things are. I mean, to sort of to think to that it has to be a double thing,
Well,
both the covering
yeah.
and the uncovering.
I also don't believe so much in that kind of like a little bit pseudo political idea of transgression. For example, art should be transgressive and so on. So I think even that's a complete misunderstanding of maybe even what real transgression could be and
I've
should
moved
be.
away from that. I've moved
Yeah,
very much away from
yeah,
that. I said that in another video, how the idea of transgressive art when I was
yeah.
20, hell yeah. Now
Yeah.
no. But
No,
anyway, yeah.
but nevertheless, I think what I try to well to, to to look for is how maybe there are artists also in the past made kind of worked around intrinsic transgressions or something like that's one of the things that I'm very scared of is what happens now more and more is that so-called progressive left-wing intellectuals or non-intellectuals, let's say artists, whatever, that they see, for example, the patrimony of the past as something that is something for like conservatives, for example. That's
Right,
something.
right.
I'm one of the reasons I still keep on going with this early music shit, so to say, is because I don't want to leave it in the hands of these people in the end. I don't want to make just illustrations of a glorious past. I find that very unfair towards all these incredible artists from whom we still are completely indebted in a way. So I mean, but but um, but but nevertheless, I see also in Flanders we had just we made also a funny documentary film about it. You can see some trailers on our YouTube channel. Like we made there was a big celebration in Flanders on this painter Jan van Eyck, the great.
Yes.
And for example, there is this idea that Jan van Eyck was a realist painter. He was the inventor of realism to oil painting and so on. But my point would be exactly that starting to paint realistically is in fact already being not realistic anymore. It means already that you are moving beyond realism.
Yeah.
Naive painting is much more realistic in a way than so-called realistic painting mimics realism because there is a crack in this mimetic process.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the painter knows that when he mimics exactly something outside of or fakes, in fact, that's of course in Van Eyck, it's a major trickster figure. This painter, it's an incredible, like it's a conceptual painter, I think somehow. But what he did, he painted, for example, this Arnolfini couple. No, this that is in London in maybe you know this painting with these two figures, the strange guy with the head and the mirror in the back.
Yes, I do know that. Do you have that slideshow? I think you said you might, or did you do that? Or
I have I could not go to this Google. No, I don't have it.
Google Slides. I know. So yeah, StreamYard makes it a little bit annoying to throw
But
images up.
can I? How can I? I have two other paintings that I could show, not this one.
If you bring it, if you put it in a window, like open it with preview
Yeah,
or something, and then you go down to present at the bottom, like that
yeah.
button at the bottom says present. If you click on that and then you go to share screen, it will let you share the screen. It'll let you share the window that you have.
I can just go to Google maybe and find it there. Can I? Is it working?
Yeah. You could Google it. Yeah. Google the image and then bring the image up nice and big, and then just do present and do screen share, right, or share screen.
Well, now
And then
I need
you
to
go
download
over.
it, no, or not even.
Screen sharing was canceled. Make sure. Oh no, that's me.
Let's see. So now do I present?
I could bring it up. Should I? What's the
Share screen? Shall I do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Share screen. Uh,
Here,
well,
let's Jan van Eyck.
the-
This is here. Yes, I actually
doesn't work.
let me bring up that painting. I can bring
Okay,
this up
okay.
right here. Um,
Wait, better, yeah.
let's see.
Maybe you found it.
It's going to be a
But
little
so
bit.
what
It's
I
going to be a
think that
little bit silly. Wait, no, yeah, no. So yeah, just keep going. I will.
this painting, which is in fact the first profane painting ever in Western painting, let's say, like it's just showing two people in a living room, whatever. Yeah, that's it exactly. I think this is such a radical painting, and it creates, I think, let's say the whole idea of a realistic setting,
Yes,
but
that cat or the no, the dog and the
yeah.
slippers. Yeah.
So it's one of these like yeah paradigmatic um, big monuments of Western painting. No, it's like the at the same time, my critique would be: are we not too much? So what we were trying to do is in fact doubting this whole discourse on realism on so in this sense it is a sort of critique on how we deal with the past. Like we believe that in the past people, like we make these people into sort of kind of historical idiots, that as if they never saw something outside their, like as if they invented or discovered suddenly um, let's say realistic things outside of their own bodies or their own whatever. And so what I think is that some a painter like Van Eyck, for example, in that painting, he discovers something like the uncanny, even the uncanny of Freud. It's a very uncanny painting. It's something a very weird. The people are too big for this space. And what you then often hear is from critics, yeah, the painters could not paint really well enough. They didn't know the rules of perspective enough to
Right.
kind of like paternalizing discourses on art of the past. While if you just would use the same parameters that we use for contemporary art and think how people are conceptual artists, always they are thinkers with images, they are thinkers with impossibilities and so on. Well, a painting starts to move. A painting starts to become something completely contemporary. And it, in fact, doesn't matter anymore if this now painted in fact, even I would dare to say, and that's something that I really believe, I think that basically the past is waiting for us. We are somehow the revealers of what came before us. The
Yes,
past,
yes, yes.
the past is not made for the people that lived in that time.
Mm-hmm.
Most,
Mm-hmm.
most artists, a lot of you have these complaints of artists and philosophers of their own time, and when they say there will be a public to come, there will be a reception to come. This goes through from, I would say, from Plato to Johann Sebastian Bach. You hear that people complain about their own times, but not in a kind of pure nostalgic way. They say we make this for people to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And
Yeah.
have this somehow this moral responsibility to negotiate with that, to reveal and unveil these things. And what happens in our own time? Well, I think it's not such a big deal that we don't get what's happening. I think it's normal. We should not understand what's
Yeah.
happening today.
Yeah.
Or, and I think art is made. I would almost dare to say it's a good sign that people. Well, maybe that's a romantic legitimation of my own. Nobody listens to your music, so it's great music.
So it must be great. Yeah. This. Yeah.
But you get my point. I think that
Yeah.
what I want to say is that that the past is not there for to know how people were at that time. Past is there for us. It's in fact our reservoir of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made for us. I love this idea that also these old scores and these old books are hibernating in a library, like this almost Umberto Eco image, no, where you have this labyrinth library and all these books are there in the dust, and then one day someone enters and takes up the book and people start to sing from such a book or start to copy the music, and suddenly this music sounds, and you imagine that this music was 600 years or something just hibernating in a library.
Yeah. And it's what's deep about what you're saying also though is that you're talking about how this ancient music and ancient art, it's for us, not for them.
Exactly.
And yet also part of part of that is not viewing it as being for us in the sense of that it's a more primitive version of now. You know, like you were saying with the like, not thinking of it as like, oh, they didn't know how to do perspective yet. So it's for us in the sense that we see, oh, well, look at how that led to people, look at it's a primitive form of knowing, it's a primitive form of perspective. Things like this idea of progress, the idea that we've learned to that paint better since then. And so it's like I like how it seems like your vision of how the ancient art, the way it is, quote unquote, for us, is by giving the artists the credit to give them the credit to assume that they knew what we know now in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's only through our modern discourses that we start to get something of what these people were into. They had to, it's a little bit, even if you think of Gothic buildings, like if you see how complex these buildings are made, I don't know what kind of computer programs they need to understand these curves that they have and these vaults and so on. You can hardly bring that into a kind of, but nevertheless they did that. So
yeah,
to maybe even ruminate a little bit more even on this Gothic idea is that I love also that idea that this serves for nothing somehow. I think it's something that we need so much, to do things that serve for nothing. Like that's also for me art. Like you build the whole building. Okay, you can always say, yeah, it's for God and so on, but come on. I mean, I think we exaggerate in these people's kind of God submission and so on. I mean, there is much
maybe
more.
So.
Yeah, there is a kind of like this drive element in it. Like they and then they build it till it collapsed. Mostly the buildings were interrupted, or they are, and then you get, for example, I don't know if you have ever been in Antwerp, where I'm coming from. We have this.
I played a gig there, but it was just show up to the club, play, leave.
Really?
So I didn't see the city or anything. Yeah.
Was that a long time ago, or
that would have been like 2010, maybe 2009.
okay.
I can't remember where. Yeah, but yeah, I've not really seen Antwerp. Yeah.
But we have this huge cathedral tower, and there is a second tower which is look the same, but it's just only the the non-finished version of the huge 123 meters tower. And so in Antwerp, people said, yeah, the plan was to make a second tower like that, and that was then. But then the money was finished. But in fact, you should say no. Of course, it was never the plan somehow to make that. In fact, the plan was to do it, but then to interrupt it. And it's perfect in its complete unfinishedness. It would be a horror. It would be a complete nightmare if you would have two symmetric towers. Like, in fact, I think that's what a little bit happened in Cologne. In the Dome of Cologne, the big cathedral of Cologne has these two perfect towers that they made in the 19th century, that it looked like symmetric.
Mm-hmm.
For me, there is something profoundly asymmetric in Gothic art, like unfinished, profoundly like interrupted. Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but sometimes I like silly questions. How disturbed were you by the fire at Notre Dame? Obviously, no one was happy about that, but I sort of I saw that, I felt this wound, and then somehow I just forgot about it. How did you process that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the thing is that it happens in the heart of the France of Macron, so to say it in a very cynical way almost. And while in so many other places they are continuously destroy old temples and old buildings and so on, and there is so I mean, well, the funny thing is also that this so-called original building, that's also what everybody knows, the spire, for example, was 90. In fact, most of these parts were, the whole Notre Dame is also a 19th century invention by Viollet-le-Duc, which doesn't bring down the fact that it's of course horrible that such a thing happened, but to say that I'm now while they are building it up again and so on, maybe I see also that they don't take the chance to open it up to another, maybe, for example, what I would really find really interesting is something like to such a monumental and such a symbolical building happens, should you then not try to somehow articulate uh, this wound, the fact that this happened? Should you not open it? Should you not give it a place?
Yes,
This,
yes, yeah. I had a yeah.
and they don't do that. They bridge it over. They overcome that. They will. It will look as if nothing happened. And
Yeah.
for me, that's what I would call reactionary culture. It you pretend that everything is fine. And I think great art from the past is not about everything is fine. It's exactly about, whoa, things are.
Right. It was never fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the whole history of polyphony. If you look at, I'm trying to make a book also about that. So I see also polyphony as a break of let's say orthodox traditionalistic Christianity or something. I see there's something happening, and if you read, it's so interesting when you read contemporary people talking about polyphonic music. They accuse it of being degenerate, decadent.
Yeah, yeah. You mean
So,
at the time? You mean contemporary
yeah,
of the? Yeah. Well, there's the what was it the Council of Trent, right? There was
no,
or
the
no.
20th century. Yeah, so they also.
Right, but there was some perceived crisis of like, oh, the polyphony is getting too right. The polyphony is getting too complex, and we can't hear the text, the liturgical text
Exactly.
anymore, and so it's become decadent or degenerate. Yeah.
And this complaint is something that happened from the birth of polyphony. So the birth of polyphony is accompanied by continuous critique till, let's say, in fact, till the moment early music is born. And that's in the 19th century with guys like E.T.A. Hoffmann, the guy from the Fantastic Stories, and other people who had a kind of Palestrina revival idea. They wanted to bring, and in fact they cut with that idea of the scandal of polyphony. Polyphony was a monster scandalous practice.
Yes,
It was
yes.
forbidden in many places. It was like impossible. It was like something that made what you say. The texts were not audible. People were seduced with it. The singers were even the singers that were standing together on these books. They were accused of being sodomites and so on. Like it's crazy. And then that are laying on each other, like as if they were copulating. You had also copula is a way of seeing polyphony together. So there is a whole sexualized jargon around polyphony to accuse them, so-called, of being not pure enough and so on. And that I find very interesting. So why not articulating that more? Why not seeing more this monstrosity of this polyphony? That's one of the things that I find really interesting for our times also.
Yeah. By the way, just people listening, I mean, when you said the birth of early music in the 19th century, you mean the birth of capital E, capital M, early music as a thing that people are calling early music. I mean, right? Is that sort of right? Like it's only in the 19th century that people start to use that term, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Exactly. There is an antiquarian idea. It's in fact, when we talked before about modernity, the idea with the Ancien Régime that was finished, French Revolution, and then you get the period in many countries, France, Germany, of restoration. All the kings came back, and so on. All the absolutism was somehow back, and so on. They tried some, and then you see that also people try to somehow revive the past, just to cope with their own alienation of their own culture. It's interesting, for example, someone like E.T.A. Hoffmann. I like this writer a lot. I don't know if you, from the Hoffman's Tales, from the Sandman. Freud had this idea of the uncanny, comes from this story of the Sandman.
Okay.
And then he has this, that's early 19th century, he has these wonderful stories that were of influence for Edgar Allan Poe, with robots and automata and so on. But it's the same time as Frankenstein, like this kind of. But this guy he was the first person who ever wrote a critical text on a Beethoven symphony. And it's a wonderful text, and he talks how monstrous this music is and crazy and really articulating our new times and so on. That's one article that he wrote. And then he has also an article on early church music, where he talks about the music of Palestrina is just one beautiful chord after another. It's childish. It's so wonderful. It's like a fairy tale music, and in fact, it's so wonderful that for, like, you can say, the trauma of Hoffman. My idea, my hypothesis would be that he needed these crazy fantasy stories to work through this dualism, this dichotomy between early church music, so pure and we lost it all, and on the other hand, that's Ungeheuer, that the monstrosity of the Beethoven
Right.
symphony, and these tales of Hoffman with robots, people falling in love with robots. They see that their own emotions are like a sort of Blade Runner avant la lettre, in fact.
Yeah. This very, like sort of like post-human, transhumanist. I mean, yeah, I mean that's a thing that's supposedly very recent, but go back to the 19th century, and you're dealing with this sense of, I don't know, the Sorcerer's Apprentice or something.
My hypothesis, even the post-human goes, and the fascination for robotica and automata is, you can find that in the same moment as the birth of polyphony, 12th, 13th century. This idea of fun parks where you had automata already, that mostly these were Arabic engineers that were invited to Europe to build this mechanical automata.
No kidding. Okay, you said like fun parks, like kind of like like a Disney-ish place where you would go to see these Arabic. They're like puppets, but they're like wind up toys and stuff like that. Is that what we're talking about?
You cannot believe this. Jan van Eyck, when he was a painter for the Burgundian dukes, he was, in the beginning of his career, he was a kind of painter and restorer of trompe-l'œil, like this kind of weird, like you think it's real and you bump your head against it, these kind of things. They had a kind of fun parks. It was called Esdin. It's in the north of France. It's still there, but the park is not there. And aristocratic people were invited to go to this park, and they fell in pits, and they were watered with machines on it's a kind of like an adventure park, in fact. Completely crazy. They were full of mud. They thought that they saw robots, that they thought it was real. A complete crazy adventure park. And the painters in that time, they were also engaged in this kind of thing. So I think if you see then Jan van Eyck's trickery in his paintings, well, it's a sort of same kind of almost post-humanity that you see already lurking there in the 15th century.
Yeah. And polyphony in some way. Well, it's the time of definitely a flowering of a. I mean, it's definitely an accelerated moment of polyphony.
And if I can still, maybe I talk a little bit too much, but maybe I get
great.
excited about that. Also, polyphony, if you think about what it exactly is, it was a quantification of orally transmitted music that was not transcribed, that was just flowing, let's say. And what did people do in polyphonic music? They started to measure durations. They were quantified, and also still the two parameters we have, the heights of the note. So in fact, the idea of writing it down in such a way, it's a sort of quantifying system.
That's right. You have to, in order to sing polyphonic music, you need to have everybody locked onto a grid, which means using writing. I mean, you can orally discuss it, but basically it needs to be written down. So there's a break with the oral, and you're working and you're going into a more mechanical process of making music. And
and also that's very interesting that people that don't really sing, or they don't sing this kind of from scores, they can hardly imagine that you cannot just start whenever you want. Once you are in a machine, the things go, the machine rolls.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, you have to obey to the rules of this quantified machine. And then, of course, the second process is there, that you try to naturalize these mechanics. As the robot Olympia in Hoffman's story, The Sandman, she's a beautiful girl. The protagonist gets in love with her. She makes oh and ah in front of the window. And then afterwards, he sees that she's a robot. She's the daughter, so-called, of a professor, a crazy professor. But she seems to be and that's what I think they called in Renaissance art, sprezzatura. It means that you cover up all mechanics, and and you create a sort of second natural state. You make it as if it's all just done on the spot, like a sort of like a easygoing.
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. I've often thought about this just with writing. I mean, doing, I've made music in so many different ways. Orally transmitted in rock bands, and then highly notated. On the most contemporary classical kind of thing. I mean, yeah, I've often thought this is a cybernetic process right here. I mean, we are plugging. I'm plugging people into this writing system. They've been trained to plug into this writing system. I mean, it's very. Yeah, it's a wild thing to even think about the inhumanity of it, and there's a power dynamic, to an extent of the puppetry in a sense of notating music for people, but in the hands of great interpreters, it's not like that, obviously. But
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah, you know what? Okay, so I'm interested in. I mean, by the way, I could keep going and keep going. I'm in no hurry, but let me know if you're getting.
No, I'm fine. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, sometimes I get too excited, and then you have to say.
Yeah, no, this is good. I'm no. Don't ever slow down. I'm interested. Yeah, alienation. I keep returning to this, but I'm just so fascinated at just what, this sense of, okay. When I think of the word emancipation, I tend to, if right off the bat, I think of Marx, right? Not that he's the only guy, but when I think of the word alienation, I definitely think of Marx. So I always think of it as being emancipation from alienation, that sort of like that's what you would be emancipated from. But when you were talking about emancipation as this sort of moment, this moment of art, and that how that kind of ties in with the unfinished nature of the Gothic and the music of holding its own death, containing its own death. Is there you were sort of talking about how alienation is the essence of what's positive here. So is alienation emancipatory?
Well, I think so.
Does
yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, is that sort of, am I mashing things together that aren't exactly like?
Yeah, in a very concrete way, even with our group, for example, we are the people that I gathered together a little bit. They come from complete different places, complete different backgrounds, complete different traditions. And I think when we are together, the first step is this displacement already. Like we are like, we all leave our proper stuff behind. But of course, there is this expertise to meet the others. And I think the work of a sort of in post-COVID times, it's maybe there is a taboo on this word contamination and infection. But okay, I will nevertheless say
yeah.
Contaminate each other with when you come from different backgrounds, people sing in different ways and are gathered around the repertoire, which is not. It's nobody's repertoire. That's also so wonderful. I cannot stand cannot stand. I mean, I have a little small problems, let's say, with this idea that I'm an expert in this repertoire. I'm an expert in this music, as if you somehow claim that you know how to do it. For me, I would already not like to listen anymore.
Yeah. I mean, expertise is really crumbling as a idea across the board.
Yeah. I saw your program on Coltrane, and then there were these, and then also you talked a lot about these things that you always see that what people want to get rid of is, even if they're the biggest experts, is expertise, because it kills. Just the whole thing that they want to not to bring in or make visible is that they, in fact, it's like empty virtuosity or something. I don't know how to say it. You want to circumvent that. You want to. So but that's already problematic. It means what should you then do if you let's say you went 5 years to conservatory, you know how to do it, and then you come to a group and the guy says there, or the people say like, yeah, we also don't know how. Well, let's see what happens. Let's like.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, listening to Graindelavoix, I mean, it did. My first impression. I mean, my first question, and I know the answer now. My first question that I thought was, is this their position on what they think the proper performance practice was, or are they just doing what they want to do? Very clearly it's the latter, but I mean, it almost sucks that my first thought is like, like, oh, is this their idea of authenticity or expertise, and
Although,
then my I
please,
know,
please.
and then my second thought, which is not a negative or condescending thought, but was actually an exciting thought, was I was like, do they know as much about early, like, are they coming to this with the same degree of scholarship as other ensembles, or am I loving this interpretation? Is what's beautiful and vital about their interpretation some kind of naivety? Maybe. I mean, clearly now we see there's zero naivety here, and it's like super informed, but you know,
Well, although I'm not talking like we talk now about all this stuff, I never talk with my singers about that. We have
oh yeah,
never, or hardly, these meta talks. With some, well, I WhatsApp with some singers in private. Then we have some talks about things, and then sometimes these things pop up. But some books we read or whatever, or some films we want to see or we share or something. But so I think even we try deliberately keep this meta discourse as remote as possible,
yeah,
in order not to start to, not, it should not become a gimmick or something. It cannot, meta, too much meta is not healthy. I think too much, it's like when you get too much good critics or something, it's in fact unpleasant. You
yes, yes,
I prefer the bad critics much more. They are much more fertile to work with. To Sometimes we even put our bad critics on our Facebook page or something, because they are always much more. They are mostly better written than good critics, but because people are much more engaged in the hatred of something, or they find it very
yeah.
bad.
Do
So
you
they
yeah, no, sorry.
no,
Go, go ahead. Oh, I was going to ask. I mean, has Graindelavoix received any negative reception? I mean, are you controversial? Is your group controversial in the world of early music?
in the world, something maybe hard to understand if you are outside, if you're an outsider. Uh, and mostly people that love what we do are, are outsiders.
Is
So
that right? Yeah.
inside, I think we are. I think the discourse that I am also like trying to as the horizon of what we do. I think they don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see even the point. Mostly, I think they. I yeah. I No, it's some. It was hard in the beginning, even, like, because I also just want to go on in the way I wanted, but I think now they accepted us and they accepted me somehow. It's because, of course, we are playing also in these festivals that are more specialized to that kind of music. Also, we are. That's also very nice. Like, I'm for example tonight invited in your podcast, which is great because it opens up the whole thing.
Yes. Well, this is very much outsider. I mean, not
Yeah.
not outsider art, but certainly outside of the world of early music. My love of early music is very much coming from a deeply I'm deeply marinated in it, but really not a part of the discourse, except in a very loose way. But I it's interesting. I mean, I'm always trying to get my friends who are on the metal side of things, and people who are into noise. I'm always trying to get them into or just goth, post punk type stuff, into early music, and with some success. And when I saw Graindelavoix, not only the music but also the visual aspect, I had in my head, I was like, I bet they have their hands outside of the academic world for sure.
Yeah, the thing is that maybe we are even sometimes more academic in a strange way, or more like our discourses are more, in a way, almost, I think sometimes they are even more sophisticated than the ones they, like, let's say, the average groups or use, which are mostly just historiographic discourses, like about, yeah, just archival research, and just trying to, in fact, also a lot of groups, I think they have this idea, we listen, we see what musicologists find out about the past, and we try to illustrate that so what is the level, they also believe somehow in that kind of idea of, okay, what's the level of research now, what do we know now, let's say, about beginning of 16th century polyphony in France or whatever. Okay, what do we know, what is sure about it, how was it done, with what kind of people. Of course, we know there is this kind of apologetic discourse around it. Of course, we know we cannot really do it as it is, pseudo modesty, like, of course it's just an attempt. But even that I find, so why do you would even like to make an attempt to what?
Right. And even just on an audience level, like who wants to hear that before this like apology, you know? Yeah.
And at the same time, I have always the feeling that they are not historicistic enough. This kind of like historiographic academics, in the sense that they then forget, for example, failure, absence of things, just. If you I think also that's the funny surrealistic aspect of this whole idea of reenactment of early music, is that when you would really do it as it was done at that time, we have descriptions of how bad it was. For example, how, yeah, I mean, you would have the most horrendous kind of you could almost so that's in fact even the contradiction of the whole thing, that suburb angelic sound that is often produced around this kind of music, that it has in fact nothing to do with any claim of historical whatever truth, or which is not a problem. But why making all these efforts to stay in such a historicistic discourse, while
Yeah.
you could have a speculative discourse, a virtual discourse, you could
Yeah.
think of,
Well, I often think about, this is very technical, but I often think about just tuning. I mean,
yeah,
how would singers be tuning
yeah,
their voice in the time, right? Because I mean, after equal tempered instruments, singers are naturally trying to sing equal tempered intervals, right? Because we're sort of like coming off of I mean, more or less that tends to be the thrust, right? And then it's like we're doing, right, if you're studying period instruments, you can go back and do instruments that are perhaps in different tuning systems, but for the voice, we don't know what, right, how they were tuning intervals at the time. So I mean, and I never hear, I mean, I rarely hear in early music performance tuning. I never hear tunings that sound too alien. I mean, it's usually pretty.
when you talk sometimes about, I remember that you in one of your shows you said that you sometimes about the tune, it sounds very pure. That's because people use, for example, pure intervals, Pythagorean intervals or something.
Mhm.
So
Oh, your connection froze a little bit. I bet it's gonna come back in a second, but we've been doing well as far as connectivity here.
we were
There's your voice waiting for
I,
the picture. There's some
some.
fragments. There's some fragments. Sonic
Am I there?
fragments here. Your visual is frozen. I can sort of hear you.
Maybe the
So
early music police is sabotaging this.
yeah. It's the ghost of Pythagoras. You know. Well, he would approve of what you're about to say, probably. Um,
Am I back or?
yeah, your voice is back. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, visual is frozen, but that's okay. It'll probably come back. Um, yeah. So right. So I was talking about, right. So yeah. So you were talking about something that I was talking about with tuning.
Yeah. Well, am I visible again, or
No, you're just, yeah,
am I audible?
your vision is frozen. Um, we got nice comments in the comments section. Bjorn, I don't know if you've been looking at the comments. We've got my friend Vivian, who's a great musician who makes microtonal music. She's asking about, she wants more tuning talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Do
guess you
you
could
hear
just
me?
keep. You could just. I do agree. Oh, here we go. Here's a little circle here. We're waiting. We're waiting. Um, this is the thing about live streams, right? I mean, if we're gonna have the cool guests, a lot of the time they're gonna be in faraway places, and the connection's not always gonna be great. There he is. What's up, man?
Ah, you can see me again.
Yeah. I can see and hear. Beautiful.
Okay.
Um, so yes, so we were talking about, yeah. What was you were talking about something that I was talking about tuning wise in one of my videos, but I can't remember.
Well, I can talk. We did recently a program Machot, Messe de Notre Dame, together with a pianist in a church. He was playing Kurtak and Senaki,
Ligeti, right?
Ligeti also exactly.
Oh, he's doing
And
Xenakis, dude. I
yeah,
love Xenakis, man. Woo.
so, so the wonderful thing was that he was playing on a upright piano and a more normal concert piano, on two pianos in a Gothic church, and the people were like in a sort of catwalk sitting on two sides. It was quite exciting, but it was also really interesting to have a piano in such an acoustics, because what happens is that the piano is like, let's say, normally like equal the temperament, but because of these acoustics, somehow the harmonics somehow balance this out and always almost brought the tuning of this piano in the same kind of, let's say, natural Pythagorean tuning that we were using for the maestro. So it's something that with an organ you never have. If you have an organ in a equal temperament, and you sing next to it this maestro music, you hear the difference of the tuning.
Yes, yes, yes.
The fifths and the fourths on the organ are too small. The thirds are also not really nice, and so on. So you hear it's very hard to, well, but with the piano, and that was so, because it's much more, like the sound is going much more up in the acoustics. You got a kind of fusional, some kind of spectral thing or something.
Yes, that
And
is
and
so
so there was a
interesting.
quite interesting experiment to see how acoustics, of course, also the same is with if you read now we go to some kind of early musicologies. If you read what they write about plucked instruments, guitars or lutes, mostly they were tuned in equal temperament, and they were even tuned like that when the singers were singing in mean tone tuning, for example, where you have pure thirds. The third, the small and the big third are pure, and it was perfect, because the harmonics of these instruments are so different that they in fact mix. So in this sense, well, it's an issue tuning, and it can be very interesting, but there is always also a pragmatics, and it depends of the space and of the
Yeah, that is wild. I didn't realize. So the Machot, when you guys do the Machot, you're doing it in Pythagorean tuning. Is that
with
right?
somehow, yes. Yes, let's say.
Interesting. Okay,
And the
because
Josquin that you heard is really in mean tone sung. If you
really,
can check that with such an app that you can change the scale in mean tone, for example, you can hear we were really trying to. It means, in fact, mean tone is very near to sort of natural choral tuning where the thirds are pure.
okay. Oh, and so actually, so when you say pure, you mean acoustically pure, like not equal tempered. That's like whatever that is, plus 14 cents or minus 14. I can't remember what that is.
Sorry, can you repeat
Oh,
it once?
you're saying when you say pure, when you say a pure third, you mean a third, a natural third,
I
a
mean, where
naturally.
there are no, yeah, natural, yeah, pure,
Yeah,
where there
yeah,
are
yeah.
no kind of these kind of vibrations going on anymore. Like when this is so-called, like, yeah, the pure, like, let's say, I think in Pythagorean terms, is the thing, like, for example, what is it? A fifth has to be 3 3 2 or something. This proportion. It's just
Yes,
proportional.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
these are the pure proportions, and when you have that. But also there is this whole fetishism also in early music of tuning and so on. And then often when you then go to these groups to hear this incredible tuning, what you say, you don't hear it, or it gets, you are much more stuck to other things that happen there that are
Yeah,
not
yeah. I mean, we're not computers. I mean, we are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Um,
So
but yeah, I mean, in the Machot, you had a lot of glissandi and glissing around, which I had not heard. I had not heard that degree or type of yeah, of like smearing of the lines. I mean, that was what really gripped me right off the bat. That was the first thing of Graindelavoix that I had heard, because I mean, the most, look, I love the Clerks group, or no, it's Ensemble Organum. I love Ensemble Organum's version, but I thought of that as being the microtonal sort of the spicy one, and now it sounds quite I don't know if normal's the right word, but it sounds quite conservative by comparison. I mean, I still love it, but
yeah, it's also very nice. What I like, for example, to talk about Organum and Marcel Perez, who is the
yeah,
director.
yeah,
I
he's
find it,
awesome. I mean, they're great. Yeah.
and for me, it's also the anti-ethnic way in a sense, because what is he doing? He asks people from Corsica or something. He asks, in fact, traditional singers uh, to join the ensemble. Some are not from traditional music, but there are some people. That's what you clearly hear. Their timbres are very different. But for this Machot, I remember that these people could not even read the score, so he had to really train them
Oh,
to
wow.
make it possible to. So what you get there is exactly what we're talking about. It's a process of alienation. It's not that these people come with their Corsican way of singing and they can just apply it directly to Machot. No, it's a whole process of somehow finding a way through these vocalizations that they are used to and to bridge them, or to, in fact, let them negotiate with the scores of Machot. And this was a crazy work. And what you get then in the end as a result, I find it absolutely the opposite of anything that has to do with ethnicity. For me, this is exactly how an encounter of people who come from a traditional music practice, how they could encounter music from the 14th century, in fact.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah.
how culture should work.
Yeah, it's so cool. I had no idea. That that's how ensemble organ worked. I mean, I just sort of assume it's a sort of set roster of scholars of early music, and they decide we're going to do this more, equatorial, or, more Mediterranean sounding vibe, and that's what we're going to, this rather than having actually different
The problem
singers.
is that you see now more and more people in early music in general ornamenting. Ornament is something that is, but you see that these ornaments are always diminutions, as they call it. That means fractalizations of a note. So, but you could write them purely down. It's just circumventions of a note. It's called in technical terms diminution. Like you sing smaller notes instead of the note that is written.
Yes.
What you hardly hear, and it's something also like traumatic apparently for classical Western singers, is what you describe: glissando, tremoli, trilli.
Yeah. I mean, especially within the polyphony, it's not just like when there's a monody or, a monophonic moment, there's some glisses maybe. I mean, you guys are doing glissandi with like the inner voices, like you're smearing up against each other. It's really yeah, it's very, very slippery, and it has a different sense of space. It's hard to explain. Like there's something I don't know, like less. I have no conceptual basis for saying this, but just like this visual image, the Graindelavoix version of Machot, it seemed like right in your face in this kind of like flat way, not in a bad way, like in a good way. Like it didn't have the same kind of carefully like the lines didn't feel as separate, maybe, or something. I mean, it's sort of fusing together in some way. That I it seemed like less fussy about making sure that no one's stepping on anyone.
But
like something like that.
Strange thing is that some of these ideas even are coming from what Adorno says about music interpretation, when he says, for example, that you have to go to the limit of subjectivity in a line. He says that somehow you have to the more particular subjective you become, the more the chance is there for a work of art to be universalized. And I find that really interesting. The more pseudo abstract you are, the more, in fact, you create a sort of false universal. Okay, it sounds universal because you don't hear it, just flat. But the more a singer, let's say, breaks into the line and starts to eat a line and starts to eat the notes and cracks them. But you hear that with jazz musicians also, of course. They have a sort of, it can be in the memory or it's on a paper, and then it's like there is a virtuality around every note, like that makes sense, or like let's call it a virtual elasticity or something. And it means that you, of course, you make everything a little bit more dirty. Things start to become, you eat things, because that's also something that fascinates me a lot about ornamentation. People always say when you ornament, you add notes to something. Ornamentation means you fill it up. But in fact, if you really look what ornamentation is doing, it's taking away, it's eating what is on a score.
I hadn't really thought of that. You're talking about diminution. Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah.
Also, when you sing a tone, not just as it's written, like let's say two beats or something, but you make a tremolo in it. In fact, you you fractalize the tone in a
Yeah.
gliding way, and you get a fraction in the tone.
Yeah,
And
you're
so,
cutting. You're cutting. Yeah.
and in polyphony, of course, this tone, if it's not stretched, it starts to make a dissonance with more than if you have it just, if let's say you have a pure interval, but then one tone starts to make a tremolo. So you get, suddenly you break down this nice consonants that people are longing for so much in the past. So that's what we try to do. We try to imitate, to imagine that there is also virtual dissonance in this music that is inscribed. So that's even like maybe it's even sort of historical practice that I'm convinced that music had to be written down because you could not be too transgressive. So it was written down in a nice way, all in this. But then the practice of these people was to just, eat it up, eat it, break it, crack it, slide it, bend it, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, even just talking about glissandi right now, I mean, I kind of had the thought like, well, if you're going to consider a line, if you're going to consider a line to be a line and not consider it to be a bunch of points, and I mean, if we're talking philosophy, I'm thinking of Bergson talking about Zeno's paradox. I don't know, but like, yeah, if a line is really a line and not just a series of points, it's inherently a gliss. I mean, all lines are actually kind of a glissando because for it to be a line, it's an unbroken gesture. It feels like an unbroken gesture, So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is also this event, which I think we lost, or we had to re-articulate when recordings started to be important. Like, let's say from the 20s on or something, when polyphonic music was started to become recorded. This event of slidings that would meet and attract each other, dissonance that were there, people who are doing glissandi, which would not match with other voices and so on. This became very problematic on a recording. You can, in fact, almost not endure that somehow. It was like too much, like in a concert in a space which is reverberant. This is fantastic because you continuously, as a listener, have the feeling that you are in an event of people trying things out, creating stuff. Once you have to record a piece of music, I think, and that's what you hear. Interesting is if you listen to the polyphony of these comedian harmonists. I don't know if you ever heard about them.
No, wait, comedian harmonists?
Comedian harmonists. These were singers from Vienna, I think, mostly in the 20s, 30s. They were mostly Jewish. They were all going then in the 30s. They were immigrating to the States.
Yeah. So we love comedy and we love fleeing Nazis. That's like our favorite.
Exactly,
it's our favorite stuff.
They do this kind of. They have this how you call that? This close harmony technique. They sing. In fact, these were radio singers. They were really professional radio singers, and they invented this kind of very, let's say, soft, pure close harmony polyphony that, in fact, if you hear a lot of early music groups now, even Hilliard and so on, this very soft singing, it comes, in fact, I think, from the way vocal groups had to be much more disciplined, much more without any ornaments because of the radio, because of
interesting. Wait, and this kind of music that you're talking about, though, this close harmony, this comedian. Wait, this is interpretations of early music, or are you talking about popular? No. This is popular singing in the 30s, right?
Yeah. These were like this kind of typical, like you have that also with female singers also. No, this typical.
Oh, you're talking about like the music for Alice in Wonderland, the cartoon. Is that what you're thinking? Like this sort of,
yeah. I know, but also like the top voice was also sort of high tenor falsetto voice, like you have done later in. So it was this kind of very light voice, like the King Singers a little bit. This kind of.
Yes.
In the States, you have also these groups. Now, these close harmony groups like that are very virtuoso, very well tuned, but they have a sort of aesthetics of sort of like angelic beauty almost. Like for me, after quickly it gets a little bit it's all very purely tuned, but you have no ornamentation, you have no slidings, no glissandi. It's very punctual.
And this is a recording based thing. Yeah. Which is different. Yeah. Well, I mean,
sorry to interrupt. One thing, we have one singer who is with one leg in the Greek Orthodox tradition. He sings also this kind of Byzantine chant, And
I
very
love
often,
that stuff.
you can hear him on some of our recordings, also solo and so on. So, but once, sometimes in polyphony, I have to tell him before or during the recording to say, don't do so many ornamentations or so much micro intervals, because it will be problematic on the recording afterwards. So we have to then a little bit find a sort of midway to make it, to make it fit in or something like. And
Yeah.
it's a pity, of course, because you can, in fact, it means that you cannot produce on a recording what you do live.
Yes,
It's
yes.
really sort of
How
boxing.
how important are records or CDs, recordings in the sort of business? To say early music business sounds funny, but like,
You sell a lot?
but yeah, you sell a lot. That's
No,
it's a
no. It was a question to you. If you still sell a lot of.
I mean, less than before, I suppose. I'm not asking, numbers of how many records you sell.
I think
I just mean the role, like the role of that in, like, is getting a great record review like a big thing for getting gigs, or is it more like you just get all these gigs and then the recordings are kind of like this side thing to kind of just, you know what I mean?
no. I think for us, our first recording that we made, that was in 2004. We made it and came out in 2006 or something. Was with music from Johannes Ockegem, this
Yes.
Misa Caput. That was really for us absolutely important to get an international radiance. In fact, it was. In fact, immediately when this recording came out, we got asked in many festivals with the international. Our international work started to appear thanks to this record, and that's we had this label Glossa. We are still, that's a Spanish label before
Glossa,
Spanish
yeah.
label. And this guy was he heard this crazy. We made this recording ourselves on our own cost, and I sent it to him. And he was enthusiastic. He thought this is something really completely different than what we know. So let's do that.
Yeah. I
And
gotta check that out because I love Ockegem. I mean, or Okechem. I don't know. People pronounce it different. Yeah, one of my absolute favorites.
yeah.
And I have not checked that out actually. Your recording of that. Yeah, so I got.
No, but it's already also old. Maybe it's. I mean, I don't know. I can. For me, these old recordings, I cannot think of or listen to them. It's like.
Yeah, no, me too. I can't. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, but no, but it's important recordings, and but it costs a lot of money, of course, to make it, because it's a lot of work also to get it well recorded. We also started to record now multi-track, something that a lot of these groups in early music don't do. They only use stereo mics, so-called, because apparently in the Middle Ages they used stereo.
Right, I know. Yeah, it's like, can we not just work with what we're doing? Yeah.
So that was a great thing. Also, the guy Alex Fostier, who is making our recordings, is in fact coming really from contemporary music. He's the engineer, also sound engineer for Ictus Ensemble in Belgium. It's like contemporary music ensemble.
I know
And
Ictus,
so he
yeah.
has this. He has not at all early music ears. He's really completely from contemporary music. So it's really nice to. In fact, I always like the comments of people who are not in this music itself, because for me, to be a specialist of early music always means a little bit that you just hang on these cliches of how this music should sound, and we try the whole time to find ways out. We try to find ways of that, maybe through these ideas, to get to another sound. I think all our recordings sound really very different also. I think the last one, compared with, for example, the Machaut, is really different. I think it has also all these little monstrosities and little strange things, but maybe it's more glued together now in this last one. It's more maybe softer, melancholic also, maybe like more the extremes are more inside or something. I think we evolve to that also more and more, that to do strange things inside the texture or something, in the coloring. It's also thanks to maybe I should also say that my singers are just fantastic people. They are like not just as human beings. They are just, they come with all these ideas. It's often, very often I say, maybe you can do it like that, and then they imitate me, but they do it completely different and much better.
Yeah,
and then I say, oh, great, do it like that, and that's how we create this.
Yeah, it's a process. Yeah. What
together.
have you been checking out the comments? Because there's a certain, I don't know, people have some questions which we never have to answer, but sometimes it's cool to see what people are interesting. Well, ex Orpheus is talking about the nasal and heavy timbre of Graindelavoix voices. I think it seems like some of your recordings are more nasal than others. Um,
More with stuffed noses when we were recording. No, I'm joking.
yeah. COVID. It's funny. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, and this may not be true at all, but I was interested in the idea. I think somebody was saying that most singing in just global, just musics from around the world, most of it is way more nasal than European music. That like the sort of marbled, rounded kind of open sound is a very specific Euro thing, and that like around the world, I mean, just most
Absolutely.
cultures, it's nasal compared to I just found that interesting.
In fact, this open, like low, more dark sound, let's say, than not nasal, is coming from the voix sombrée, as it's called in the typical classical singing, that you sing with the low larynx, with the low larynx singing. So that helps to make this when another thing is also that's quite interesting that so the guy that sings, Adrian, the guy that comes from with one foot from the Byzantine, he once let me listen to early Greek recordings of Greek singers from like the 20s or 30s, and they were way more nasal.
Yeah.
Like not only because of the techniques but their voices were also much more. And of course, maybe now that I think of that, also there is also something really strange that the techniques of recording in the beginning were also very narrowing the spectrum of the sound. So it's sometimes hard to say objective things about that. Like, were their voices so nasal, or they just in this horn? They had to sing with 5 or 10 people in such a horn, no? But I think in general, I don't know if you ever listened to this last castrato, Alessandro Moreschi.
No, I read a little bit of the book about him, and
Yeah.
but
But what's so interesting is that if people really want to redo or reenact this kind of, they would hate the sound. That's probably the reality, the nightmarish reality of what we so-called long to. If we would really get these people back and let them sing in today, we would just find it awful, in fact. And this awfulness, I find it also like a pity that there is not more space for that, in a way, like this kind of aesthetization of that's for me also and this political aspect of it. Like, why do we need to make it all so angelic and beautiful? And I think early music is exactly this realm of music stuff where we can try things out. And
yeah, I mean, and you say angelic and pure. I mean, why do we associate those words with these certain sounds, right? I mean, why is dissonance not angelic? Well, I suppose because it's higher up in the. Well, if it's higher up in the harmonic series, then that would be closer to the God, I suppose. But anyway, yeah.
You see also that there is a lot. How shall I say? When you do a glissando, it's mentally as if you hear a body. You feel almost a body. If you have a gritty voice, it's like the voice, the person itself in its subjectivity is more there. And this gets I think for a lot of people who want to hear music as something distant and asexual. Also, there is also that sexual problem of having people to. So when you get slidings and things that are gritty and so on, I think a lot of people have trouble with that, to accept that somehow.
Yeah. No, the body. I mean, singing in general. I mean, in one of my really early videos where I wasn't really doing nothing scholarly, I was just sort of free associating. But yeah, just I mean, talking about how the voice. I mean, it's just so. It's it's experienced by other people and yourself as more personal than playing an instrument, because your body is the thing. And
Yeah.
there's this way in which I've said this before, when someone doesn't like your voice, it's kind of like they don't like your body. Like, it's very hurtful. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the shape of your throat is ugly, and I don't want to hear it. Like, it's, this is why people are so shy about singing. And it's interesting, you were saying with glissandi, there's something about where the grain, the Graindelavoix, is more yeah, is sort of more like felt or experienced.
The, just reacting on somebody that talks about like violin playing and so on. I also think that, for example, if you compare a Baroque violin with gut strings, like playing this kind of partita of Bach or something, and you compare that with the modern violin playing, for me, what I think is the great, let's say, surplus of such a gut string violin is exactly the failure of it. The fact that the gut string violin cannot make that so beautifully, fetishistically beautiful as a phallic metal string violin, played by mostly then these kind of guys, like you see them playing this partita of Bach with like as if they, I mean, like this kind of macho
Like sort
way
of
of
phallic gusto.
sounding.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you hear a Baroque violin with the fragility of these strings. You can never tune that so well. You can be the best player, but always. And I think even this is a sad thing, even in Baroque playing, that they try to get better and better and to get to. It should sound almost now like, in fact, what they wanted to get rid of. In fact, so for me, when you hear suddenly the fragility and the subjectivity in this playing with the Baroque violin, and that is what a Baroque violin invites to that. I think this is absolutely a surplus. So for me, it's that what I find really interesting in. So a guy with a voice which is not a classical academic phallic voice, let's say, but can read scores well and can sing with Graindelavoix, for example, and brings in a kind of subjectivity in this polyphony. It's amazing, in fact.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
You get
I've
the point, right? And that's what I don't get. What do we want in classical music sometimes? I don't get it, in fact.
right. Yeah, I
What
mean,
are we aiming for?
yeah. I mean, I've been trying to like, I only very recently started having thoughts about my own future because I'm 42. I'm like getting to that halfway point, and I'm like, dude, my voice is only gonna go downhill from here. But then I'm trying to think like, I gotta view it as not downhill. I'm gonna have to view it as the grain. I'm gonna have to
Of
get
course,
in.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to, but that will involve writing different stuff to sing. It's gonna involve,
Of course,
harnessing it, riding that in different ways. So I've recently been trying to figure out a way to get excited about that. You know, late Leonard Cohen records. Well, I mean, not that his voice was ever like bel canto, classical singing, but just this sort of I don't know. There's greater fragility, a graininess, that comes in. It has to be dealt with.
yeah. I think that's also a pity that like old like singers nowadays, when they are indeed like in classical music, like even female classical singers, they can hardly they have to go then to teach or something because they are not asked anymore because they are not brilliant or whatever. There's this aim for this brilliance, no, for this shiny thing always. And so what we try to reinvent or refine is, yeah, what I guess what you are also up to, like what a lot of people in other genres are looking for, but in classical music this is always like, yeah, I don't know to say, like
Yeah. Well, but there's so much cool stuff in like underground, just really experimental rock music or metal or something where you have, there'll be musicians who are putting in the same level of just insane rehearsal time, as a classical musician, but without having done the training as kids, without having developed that baseline of technique. So there's this amazing, roughness that's been like, but also the rigor of just working on just really complex music in the present, that can just be a very beautiful meeting of like the sort of the fragile of the sort of punk, zero, or low chops or untrained chops, but then all this effort of rigor later, I don't know. There's
yeah, yeah.
different forms of rigor,
I think also that one of the things in this then classical or even this early music is this to unlearn, see, to work with people and young people and bring them well, it's also true that more and more I see that also with young singers, they know much more of other music. The way this fetishism of the voice is going less, I find it less and less, I think. And
Yes.
they're more interested to use different voices. One of the funny things that before, for example, girls that sing in chest voice, that was really always problematic in classical singing. Like, but now you see high sopranos, no problem. We go in the chest voice and so on. We try all these things because also in early music sometimes these chords go very low for
Yes.
top voices and so on. So then they have to do that. But you see that there is less and less taboo and less some kind of, I don't know, like traumatic experience around that. Like it's more just like,
Yeah.
let's try that and let's. But yeah, I don't know. It's well.
Do you happen to know Daisy Press, the vocalist? She's a really great singer of Hildegard, New York based singer. But she's I don't know, she was we've worked together a bunch, and she
Oh,
loves Graindelavoix. But yeah,
okay.
she does a lot of stuff in Vienna now with like the Klang Forum and like Beat Führer and Fausto Romatelli and these contemporary stuff as well.
Okay.
Any case, just thinking about super versatile sort of state of the art modern
Yeah.
vocalists who are
No, I think also how you are. I listened to things of what you did not so long time ago, like your last album also that you brought out, the influence of the whole early music heritage and so on. It's so clear there. I mean, it's incredible how
yes
even
yeah
through even the reworkings in other music, how it's wonderful how that. I mean, it's absolutely not a terrain that is someone's monopoly or whatever. I mean, it. I think it's
yeah I
it's
mean
clear.
yeah people like it. I mean, I think it's interesting to kind of it's interesting to sort of have studied early music but also not, but also yes, but also not, I mean, just sort of not having studied this music in any kind of completist way, or even, I mean, I just went to a liberal arts college, so I mean, I studied music there, but basic harmony, four part, tonal harmony, not early music at all. And so it's, I don't know, it's fun to just have these aspects of it that I am very familiar with, techniques and counterpoint stuff, but then other aspects of it that I just have no foundation in. So it's very,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think I'm not at all. I'm myself a little bit outside of this early music world as such, and these people that identify more and more becomes like a sort of identity thing. This early, I think it's not. It doesn't bring anything. I think it's good that it's just a sort of legacy that would be open to a lot of kind of singers and people. That the more this becomes this niche like specialists doing it, the more difficult it becomes for others just to approach it in their own proper way or to find other ways with it. So I don't know. I always found it a little bit too conservative and too much like keeping it in this institutional thing. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a pity. It should be, in fact, you should almost like if you have like you study jazz, you study then also this early music. It should be almost like normal to do that. Or
I mean, I think for most people, actually just listening to some like ancient music,
yeah,
it's maybe only a little bit less accessible than jazz. Like a little, I mean, but really it's basically on that same level. So there's, yeah, I mean, I think it's,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's also absolutely not classical music. In what you also once said in one of your talks before, I know that I remember that you said that like it has not this classical kind of aura or something. There's something weird in
Yeah.
it. Thing that
There is a humility to it. I mean, but see, this is
yeah,
projecting. This is projecting on what I think the people felt. So I got to tread
yeah,
lightly with the fantasies, but just to what it sounds like to me. I mean, there is this humbleness before God or something. Whereas when you get into like actually like Mozart and Haydn, it sounds like human beings who are proud to be human beings, and we're in the it's not necessarily arrogant, but we're in the age of humanism, and
yeah.
we have agency, and the human is sovereign, and this and that. Whereas there's this there's this fear
I
and
think
trembling with early music, this quaking, before like higher forces.
yeah, absolutely. I think these people also these polyphonies they developed a lamenting like art, the art of lamentation. Like you have that in the great, like in I don't know Chinese lamentations and from the big cultures from the world, but you have that also in the Burgundian laments. Or it's just incredible how they developed such a style or something where and it's also what I like a lot. There is this kind of like, I think even our last CD of Josquin, which is only laments, there is some joy in it at the same time. There is something that absolutely goes up also. It's not just I think that's the greatness of this music, that there is this dialectical element also in it. It looks like, oh my God, this will be very heavy, but then it's uplifting. In fact, it's and the more even it's dragged down. I think we tried that also to do with the tempi of the tempos of the music, and the rubato almost, that you feel like the more you drag it, the more it works.
Yes. Yeah, I do tend to like slower the sort of the slower tempi when people interpret early music.
Our Nymphe des Bois, I don't know if you know that piece of Josquin. That's the déploration for the death of Johannes Ockeghem. That's one of the pieces. I think in our CD, it's normally this piece is 5 minutes. In general, you can check on internet. It's Nymphe des Bois, so nymphs of the forest. It's like an acclamation to lament for Josquin. Mm-hmm. And our version is, I think, between 8 and 9 minutes. So it's almost not yet double, but so it's super slow. But of course, you get them purists to say, no, this is too slow. This cannot be. This is. But it's on the verge of breakdown. And I think also this is something that I can only learn from people who are not in early music at all. I listen to people playing Schumann, or to jazz people, or to a blues guy, and I hear how this goes to the moment that a line is cracking or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm testing out if that's possible in that music, and then it's like I refined almost some sort of little essence of it in it.
Yeah. I mean, to play really slow and to have it drag, but not die. To not have it to still have forward motion. I mean, it is really something. I mean, you hear this with certain kind of doom metal and stuff. Or I mean, like Ray Charles playing like the tempi, or just to somehow sit in that dragging is yeah.
But you have to come to a point where you say, okay, we just do it. We don't care if that now is absolutely not allowed, or in our own bubble, and then we discover that then we are also surprised. In fact, that's maybe also what I like a lot, that you are yourself surprised with what happens. You also don't understand it completely, how that works, or I don't know. Like,
well, we also. Yeah. I mean, also sometimes things things that seem like they would be less accessible to people actually maybe become more accessible. You know, it's like, I mean, to have it really drag, you know, especially to someone outside of early music, you know, to someone who's coming to this without sort of this idea that it's supposed to be a certain tempo, you know, but they just are like, oh, this is, you know, like. Well, not medieval, early Renaissance, lamentation, you know, the idea that it would be 9 minutes. So certain things are more powerful when they go on, quote unquote, too long, because it's not too long. That's what, you know.
The joke in Belgium was that we got with this last album in the top 200 of all music. We were even before Adele and so on.
Nice.
With this album, with this. Go.
Europe is a different place, my friend. It's still very different.
Yeah, but it's somehow funny that what you say, that and then the album with the most lamenting, depressing songs. Maybe it's something also that people need in a way. Like, maybe people understand it. I'm also not underestimating a public. I think there is maybe still space for what we try to do. I don't know.
I mean, you know, there are drone noise artists who play shows to like 500 people. They're buying tote bags of the band, merchandise. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And we're talking about like ear-splitting noise, you know? So it's like, I mean, I think a lot of these people would love a 9-minute Josquin, tribute to Ockeghem, you know? But
it would sound almost commercial to them, like
probably, right. It's no, but this is yeah. I mean, you're already reaching way outside early music. It's such a beautiful thing. So I mean, I could personally go another 10 hours with you, Bjorn, but I think I'm cutting these off. I like to make them shorter than 3 hours, because I realized if they go to 3 hours, I can't host them on the podcasting platform unless I do the next subscription level and stuff. So In any case, I think we got worlds, dude. Worlds we got into. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was super fun and a pleasure. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
nice.
man. I mean, I can't wait for what you're doing next. Let's do just on
I
the
told
most.
you that now I'm infected by your podcast to do myself to start the
Oh,
podcast, and
you
then I will
absolutely
invite
should.
you. I will invite you, and then you talk about your music and your
I would. Oh
kind of
man, I
struggle.
would.
That
I would love nothing more, man. I would love nothing more. But hey, not just for me coming on there, but just for you and for the world, you should absolutely do a podcast, man. I mean, are there any early music podcasts that people should check out?
I think there are, but not that I check out myself. So I, um, no, I'm more listening to more like theoretical stuff or philosophy or something.
Yeah.
Or
What's a good what are some good philosophy podcasts to give a I mean, I know some that I like, but yeah.
uh, well, I like these kind of guys from like this Douglas Lane. I like this kind of
Yeah, yeah, he's cool. Yeah.
guys are good, and there are. I listen to some American podcast on Hegel and so on and on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I like to, do you know this this podcast Hermetics
I think
podcast?
yeah, I think I have it also. I could
Yeah,
check.
I can't
Yeah,
remember his
yeah. I
name.
listened to some episodes. Yeah,
James Ellis, this guy
yeah.
in England who I like a lot. Um but
I think so.
yeah, man. And yeah, and before we go, what's the very next thing for Graindelavoix?
We start a new project about an earthquake mass from the 16th century.
Okay.
Antoine Brumel, he has a kind of weird, almost programmatic composition where he imitates like the trembling of the earth, and so it's a sort of it will become the kind of atlas of catastrophes. I think, like with I invited a Portuguese guitar player from experimental music, Manuel Mota, to join us. And it's with four wind instruments and singers. It's 12 voices in total. It will be so that we are going to rehearse next week in Ghent. Then we have Josquin concerts coming up in Belgium and in Germany, in Erfurt,
Beautiful.
I think. And
Wait, where you said Erfurt?
you know this place?
I've played in Erfurt.
Oh, really?
Yes. It was I
Of all,
remember it. I know. I remember it being a very strange and very cool show that was like
huh?
outside. This was with Extra Life the first time around because I just recently revived Extra Life after breaking
Yeah,
up
yeah,
for 10 years.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was from like I think so this would have been 2010 or 11 and I think it's like the last show it was the last gig to come together while booking a tour, paid surprisingly well and was awesome, but I'd like never even heard of the town. Anyway, but so they're having Grand de la Voix there.
Yeah, well, we have been also there one time, but now I think it will be nice. It's a more industrial building. I don't know. And then we are in the middle in a circle. We bring our own lamps with these Philips bulbs we still find illegally on internet. You can still buy them. They are not, the old Philips.
They're not legal
Very
anymore?
unecological bulbs, but that's the only lighting we use. So we have just 5, 6 bulbs on an iron metal thing, and we like a sort of conspiracy thing there. We sing the polyphony, and people are around. It's really nice. People are always like more on 4 sides,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah. That sounds
we should
awesome.
do a show together, like in 2 parts or something. First
Dude,
lament. So
I would love to, man, just say the word. Say the word.
we
I
will
mean,
try.
we're going on tour in January. We're not playing I wish we were playing
You're going to
Lisbon.
Liège, no? To
What's that?
Belgium. You are in Belgium.
Yeah, we're playing Liège and we're also playing Brussels at the end of the tour.
Where,
But
where are you in Brussels? You
in
know?
Brussels, what is I could look at the spreadsheet. I can't remember the name of the place in Brussels. In Liège, we're playing at L'Anvers,
Okay.
and
In AB, the AB in Brussels. AB. No.
AB no is it's ANVERT L'Anvers. Where is here? I'm bringing up my tour spreadsheet
Yeah.
here.
I will,
In
I will, I will, take it. I will. I think maybe in January you're in Brussels also.
yeah. Oh, I can't even I don't even. Okay, yeah, I don't know the name of the, or I haven't written down the name of the venue in Brussels yet, but I'll let you know. Yeah, yeah, Liège. It's L'Anvers. I wish we
I
were
will
going to
try to talk,
Antwerp, but
but they are very arrogant, pretentious people.
ooh, in Antwerp are they?
No, so they think they have everything themselves there. They never invite anybody. We are
Is that
also
funny?
in Antwerp, but no,
That's
I'm a little bit. There's a little bit the vibe in Belgium. Antwerp people are pretentious, and
yeah,
so
they're twerps. I don't know if you had that expression. You're like calling someone a twerp. I don't know. That used to be like in America. Anyway,
it comes maybe from Antwerp.
I doubt it. I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it just means like a little arrogant, a little arrogant prick or
Well,
whatever.
that's the vibe.
Good. Yeah, I need to learn these little stereotypes because then I can go over and make fun of people from Antwerp and the people, and I ingratiate myself in the people from Liège, who are maybe more supposedly more down to earth. Um,
Yes, is interesting, very interesting.
yeah, but cool, man. Yeah, dude, I would love to do a concert with you, man. Anytime. Let's talk about stuff, man.
We
Let's
will
talk
make
about
it
stuff.
happen
Yeah,
once.
absolutely. Cool. All right, man. So, again, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll be in touch more and more, dude.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Uh,
much.
all right. Be
Guys.
well, Bjorn.
Sleep well. Well, I go to sleep now.
Yeah,
Almost.
yeah. I've got a
Yeah.
whole day. All right. Later, man.
Thank
Yeah. How cool is Bjorn, man? That was a good one. Dude, I get the best people on this, right? Let's just face it, man. You're not gonna get this anywhere else, dude. Only on Last Things. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope we got to enough of the questions. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. All right. Good night, all. Bye.